travel till 9 o'clock, so I gotta go.
That's sometimes because people report underneath.
Right. Oh, I think sure.
And I think it's the last.
Now you better give me one of those so that I can get it.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah.
This is a reputation.
I guess it's a lady.
Everything on the agenda. Every time all we wanted was use 360 and all of a sudden. Well, you guys are up here, but the faster.
Sure.
All we wanted to do was the 360. That's all contingent on what
No, but it's
well, let's give Diane, and she'll get somebody to take minutes.
That's a long day.
Last traveling.
See you again. Good to see you. Good to see you. Are you ready, Diane?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, please. Start with the
Allegiance to the flag of God, indivisible. Here.
Mr. Sandoval?
Here.
spent right, and so we'd like to add part of the budget approval. We have to, should we decide to do that tonight?
I'd like to ask
that we consider our next meeting,
24th of May.
24th of January.
I won't be here, but, so I was asking with consideration to possibly if we could, ahead of time.
5:13, 5:14,
513 approving negotiating agreement?
well, we have some discussion, we had a little bit of, we have to do reserves from the, from 5:15 to, 5:15 to,
Okay, February.
need a motion to
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
appoint tomorrow. Approval of the final budget.
Do not submit the budget, the Colorado Department of Education for the budget as it's set. To prescribe, but yes.
Could 24th for the final budget, so we would have time to study.
If you're going to pass a, I'm looking at John because maybe he might know, but no, I've always understood it has to be done by the end of January.
We thought we were going to one or two items in the print. And ask questions tonight, of course, that you might be able to answer for us, but,
Right, if that's what you want. I will walk you through the resolution so that you understand the 24th. You should be able to just go ahead and take that.
that's really part of it. 5.1 and 5.2 is Carolyn. Is everybody ready? We'll just go ahead and.
And I'm going to use the podium because I like to have something to stand behind. Thank you. We'll start with going through the budget, I presume, since that's the first item on a recommended amended budget. In June, you were asked to adopt it. And at the time you did that, you approved a use of fund balance resolution that had a total of $764,000 and some odd change. The district has made changes since that budget was adopted to try and eliminate that excess spending. And the kinds of things they did was they reorganized some positions. Your original budget had steps in there, it had some attempt to increase the health that were made last summer or prior to the beginning of school. You actually were able to wipe out most of, if not all of, that original use of fund balance. Then when enrollment came in November, it came in at less than what you expected. And your per pupil revenue came in at about $100 less than what the budget was built on. And so again, you lost about $300,000 worth of revenue, $312,400. You've managed to make up some of it, like there is some, you're now getting small rural schools money that you hadn't anticipated. There was some overstatement of local revenue, and I think it's because you're now getting discounted services instead. So you're paying less for your telephone, paying less for the internet. And somebody made the remark that, if it's now being discounted and you're not going to collect the revenue, that there should be a budget line item that we can reduce. But in looking at those reduce that particular budget. So there was something is in this budget that has a zero net effect. But we probably need to point it, and it becomes a safety issue when you've got that kind of thing. You can do it over a 5-year period here and tell you how you need to account for it under general. Recognize as proceeds from a capital lease the full revenue and expense. That's a zero impact on your budget. This is for just to meet the accounting standards, and the annual payment of it's just under $37,000. Ronnie is rearranging his planned spending of his budget to be able to make the first annual payment without increasing the budget. So you have a telephone problem, you're solving it without increasing the budget, but I have to build in the accounting change that's going to happen when the auditors get here. Because when they go to put it in your financial statements, at the back of the audited statements, it compares budget to actual. And if you don't have that $185,000 in there, they're going to say, you did not actually budget to enter into that lease. So that's why that line item's in there, and it's listed on page 2 as one of the changes.
So that we paid for over a 5-year period, we had to put that in the budget, that's what.
You will still, I presume, take action on the actual lease or the actual solutions for the telephone. I'm just building it into the budget to allow you to go ahead and proceed doing it. Remember, when you pass a budget, it doesn't automatically give a blank check to everybody. If there are items back to you for specific approval, okay? Then there were some other small changes in federal and state or state revenue and the transfer to food service. This is just to make everything that goes from one fund to the other, if there are transfers, make everything agree. Because you can't say you're going to transfer $110,000 out of general fund, but in food service fund you say you're going to receive $125,000. In food service fund, they can only receive as much as what you budget. Have an amount in there. It doesn't mean you have to transfer that amount. You can monitor the activity during the year, and if you went to all school free lunch, which is going to change the revenue flow, and if you find out that you took in more money there and you don't need to transfer the whole amount that's in the budget, you as a board certainly can say, yes, let's transfer less. So again, a budget doesn't mean it has to happen exactly as you put it in there. So when you look at the expenditures on page 2 and it says salary decrease, benefit decrease, those were specific positions where I could identify the salaries and benefits that went with it. But then when I looked in the budget, some of those items were already in the June budget. If something was known at the time the budget was adopted, the benefits change was $285,700. But some of it was a budget. It's not showing that entire change, which gets real confusing. We had to add $4,000 to the budget. They don't give you a grace period. There's some software that you have to buy in your prior meetings, so I built that into the budget revenue. So that's where that wash. And then there were some unidentified changes between the time the budget was been talking about changes and somebody went under the budget column to identify all those line items. So what's the balance of $350,000? Okay. But that's a whole lot smaller than what it was when you started last year. You had a plan that was working well, but if your enrollment goes down and your per pupil revenue goes down, they're going to cut that amount of money. You need to, as you look at planning your 18-19 budget, you need to be able to address that $350,000 and how are you going to eliminate that? So that when you do get new money, you can start restoring some things that I know you've been cutting and not doing that desperately need to be done, whether it's facility improvements or curriculum that needs to be adopted, or your staff or increases have been slim to none. So those kinds of things you're going to see in the subsequent pages. This is actually a little table that is linked to those other pages on July 1, 2017, and these are straight out of your audited financial statements. Then we have what we expect to collect in revenue and what we plan to spend. And the fourth column where it says surplus or deficit, you can see that all of the funds are balanced except for general fund. That's where it has the minus $350,000. That means your expenditures, that interest that you earn, at some point as you near the end of your bond payments, you'll need to look at this and see if you can reduce the amount of your levy, because you are building up a cash balance. But keep in mind, you don't collect your taxes till March. And sometimes your payments are due in November, December. So you got to have a cash balance going into the year to make that early payment. So, don't think of it as you've got $700,000 and some in bond fund that you don't need. It just means you need that cash on hand on July 1 to make that payment before you start collecting your new taxes in March. Okay? So then we have other appropriations, and I don't know if you want me to discuss it now or wait till, why don't we wait till we get to the resolutions, because it explains it in there. Bottom line is basically you have some funds that were set aside for a specific purpose, and let's use student activities. You collect money for students, earn money, you deposit it for them, they choose how to spend it, you write checks, and they have a cash balance that they carried over as of July. $1 that was in there. You have to make sure you've actually appropriated for them to do that. We all know they're not going to do it, but you have to err on the side of caution that if those funds that are basically theirs, if they chose to spend them, that you've appropriated enough. Because we fill out a form called financial accreditation, and you have to answer yes to that. You're in violation with a certain statute. You have to explain what you're going to do to resolve it. So you never want to end the year where you've got something like the activity fund where you didn't budget enough because you don't know exactly what they're going to be doing. You're budgeting that they're going to have the revenue and they're going to potentially spend it all. So that's why we have to appropriate. You know, once you understand how this is laid out, you can go back. Statute requires that your budget is a budget for adoption. You should make where you think the year is going to end. You're going to see, you're going to want to be looking at the trend over the 3 years instead of just 2. So columns A, B, and C, those are actual audit results. You've got a large print program and object is required by state. The only thing that salaries, benefits, purchases aren't quite in compliance with statute is because you didn't do the summary. This document that I have opened up here, you were using it in 1213. So it was sometime after that, a little more difficult to read. Here, it is summarized in accordance with the way the state would require. So you have to add still doing some of the entry, hopefully, maybe by your second of September. Column F and G, we've been making changes. You want to be able to detect that you would have collected about 25% of your revenue, would have expended about 25% of your expenditures. So G is just for you to be able to look at actual spending for the first quarter compared to budget. And the budget remains are not required by the state. Those here made changes way over here. I'm trying to figure out, get everything to represent the way you've chosen to operate. And, I don't have a forward for you to consider as the amended budget. Okay? Column I is again a monitoring column. And again, is not required by state statute. But because you made so many changes from the prior year, I thought it was important that when you looked at that amendment, so that column I is comparing what you actually did in 16-17 and what is in the amended budget. So if it's in parentheses, it means it's less more than what you did the previous year. And like I say, that is not a required item. The changes occurred. Your key line is just below. We have section 1, section 2 is in the box, and that's your expenditures. You go just below that, and that's where you have your excess or deficient left to right. If you see a positive number, that means your revenues exceeded your expenditures for that year, which is true of 2014-15. If it's a minus number, that means you were using fund balance as you went along. And when you look at column B, it says that you used $195,000, but look up under revenues on line number 8. If you look at line 8 and go across to the second column, there's $149,500. That was the sale of Rice School. That's a one-time revenue. If you had not sold the school, your current operating expenses would have exceeded your current revenue by more like $350,000. Okay? Column C, you can see the use of fund balance grew to $855,000. Your original budget the $764,000 that you authorized in that resolution, under column D, if you were to add you add that $523,500 for the deficiency, plus you appropriated an amount of money for your TABOR reserve. And that $241,320 added to it makes up your $764 that you approved in June. I'm not going to go through the other columns because column E is, just a mid-year, our first quarter type number. But the key is under column H, you've got the minus $350,000. And I've highlighted that appropriated reserve. That is again your TABOR reserve, $281,000. What an appropriation says, what is the maximum amount you can spend? At this point, you could spend the budgeted expenditures, and if an emergency came up and you had to use the 3% TABOR reserve, you want to make sure you appropriated it. So the $281,000 is added into the appropriation amount. Right now, when you pass the authorization resolution for use of fund balance, it's only going to be the $350,000. Because if something came up where you had to use the TABOR reserve, we would expect that they come back and you give that next authorization to go ahead and use that $281,000. If you had significant flooding, and let's say there were some larger deductibles, flooding coverage is always a little iffy as to whether $1 million you might have to dip into that reserve to be able to make the payments to finish off the repairs. But you would, as a board, sit down and say, yes, let's authorize using that money. We're appropriating it so you could use it if you needed to. But the authorization resolution is only addressing the $350,000 that is planned use of reserves. The other one, you don't plan to use the TABOR reserve. But if you had to, you would come back and do a new authorization resolution. Because authorization resolutions can be passed anytime you become aware that you are going to be spending your reserves. So if something subsequently happens and you find out you have to spend some reserves, you can do another resolution. So that's why we're not including the TABOR in the resolution, because you only plan to spend the $350,000. When you go to page 5, you've got the same columns, but what you have is here it tells you, breaks it out by program guidance counselors, your school nurses, that type of thing. Then you've got school your legally required things like audits, and you have legal falls in that category. School administration is what it takes to run that school department. Facilities maintenance, you all know what that is all about. Page 6, you've got transportation. H is central services. Under central services, you have your property and liability insurance. You have your technology. I think that is primarily all you have, because you don't have a separate HR department. Those services are based on kinds of salaries and benefits for classified staff. If it's for instructional staff, it's up under instructions. And then, of course, you have debt services. And in general fund, you took what this did it, you had the lease proceeds and you had the total expenditure. So it had a zero impact on your bottom line. You are making annual payments on that, and the auditors would have called it a capital lease. And so when you restate it as principal and interest instead of something as part of your maintenance cost. So again, this is an accounting kind of thing. When you make the payments, you're paying it out of like a repairs and maintenance kind of account. But the auditors are going to take and reclassify this and call it principal and interest. And that's just because generally accepted accounting principles a month. So when you go to page 7, here's where you start. You have nutrition services. Same columns, same concepts. Okay? And I'm not gonna go through every one of the funds. They are all in here, including Fund 74, which is your student activity agency fund. In fact, that might be one that would be interesting to just take a look at. It's on page 11. The revenue is between 200 and 230,000. Your expenditures are, lowest was 195,000, highest was 223,000. So that 300,000 should very well cover without going over budget. And a good example is the year you had to buy the band uniforms. And if you hadn't had a cushion in here, because you got insurance proceeds the year before, you took and had to buy the band uniforms the following year, that's what caused the blip in the expenditures when it went from 195,000 to 223,000. I'm sure that's the major reason why that one year was higher. So I'm not going to go through every one of these pages, I would address questions, but at the end. If you look at pages 13 through unnumbered page 16, this just gives you a visual. It's a graph that shows a kind of, it's for people who like to look at that kind of thing. Again, I don't know that there's anything I want to highlight on it. Your from expenditures, your construction is just about 55%. Your instructional support is 7.7. Your office, school offices is 7.8. To some of you that, it's information that you want to know, but it's not something that's required as part of the budget adoption. When you go to your next tab, because, okay, that was the budget summarized by program and object. It's the budget you received when you went to adopt it. But you had it by location, you had all kinds of account codes. I ran a report on the SDS system, and what you were given rolled up into the totals that are in this budget under the budget adopted column. So in this document, you have it summarized in accordance with what the state would require. But statute says you have to use the prescribed form from CDE. That way, instead of sending a budget up to CDE and them entering it on a computer, they want it to look the same regardless of what district somebody wants to collect. Fund 10, you've got 21 as your food. The information on here that we're suggesting, and we're putting it on the state prescribed format, okay? And you'll notice highlighted, yes. It auto reserves resolution. And so, they need to be aware of having to pass that extra resolution. Now, I'm going to note that was passed out.
Yes.
Okay. Don't look at the one in your book because there was a late change here. But basically, the first resolution, the front page is your appropriations resolution. It states the amount, the maximum amount that you can spend out of each fund. And so it's called appropriations resolution because you're taking action to say it's okay to spend this amount of money. And the numbers over here will agree with this summary. You'll see when I say it. Okay, this summary in the budget you just looked at. Remember that second page where I said it's the summary of beginning fund balance, revenues, expenditures. There's a column that says total appropriation. That is what you should expect to see on your appropriations resolution. That's how you know that the document you reviewed as your amended budget is what you're actually approving. You should be able to see the number in your budget as to what you're authorizing as the new budget. The second resolution is this one that says authorization resolution. What that one does is we have to explain to you exactly which amounts we're gonna be spent, or we want you to authorize to be spent out of reserves. And we have to give you the reasons why. And if you take a look at that particular one and look at food service, co-curricular, certain expenditures. So that's one of the whereases. Then when you look at 1 through 5 down below, if you look at 3 through 4, those are the funds where the money is there for a specific purpose. It's restricted for that purpose. And so food service has $55,108. It says appropriated in food service fund to sustain activities at the current level without reliance on transfers from general fund. You could choose that, if you're approaching the year end and you want to have them use some of it instead of, always transferring money from general fund, you certainly could do that. Under your co-curricular activities, they had a beginning fund balance of $4,662. Again, if you chose to spend it instead of making a transfer, you certainly could do it. And we talked about the student activity account, the fact that the money actually belongs to the students because they raise the money and they choose how to spend it. You need to be on the safe side that if there is spending that spends into those reserves, you've allowed for it. Okay? So you're 3, 4, and 5, you're ensuring that you're staying in statutory compliance if something happens. Up under 1 and 2, number 1 is the $350,000 that you saw in the budget document that you received. $350,000 appropriated in the general fund to compensate for loss of revenue due to decrease in enrollment and per pupil funding and sustain operations at the planned level. So that's basically why you're having to spend the $350, because you made the adjustments to not have spending in excess of revenue. In December, you got your per pupil revenue amount. In November, you got your enrollment. January 1 or December 31st, you are now looking at still using $350,000 of your reserves. Number 2, I added because as a result of negotiations that went on for the last 2 days, I was told that I should have a use of reserves in the amount of $18,000 to provide additional health insurance contributions for employees in accordance with pending negotiated agreements. So again, we know it's coming down the road. The fact that you might not take action until your next board meeting, you'll know better, what other actions you've taken. But I built it in so that you have the authorization in place, okay? But it's not built into this book because we did it at like 4:30 tonight. So, when you go to pass these resolutions, the way you're supposed to do it is you would read this resolution and then take action, first and a second, and pass it. Then you do the authorization resolution, where you again read what's on this document, and then some person reads it aloud, then you take the action. This particular page, this is not a resolution. What this is the recommendation for the use of fund balance. That is administration's explanation of why it had to be done, and their assurance that you are not going to, I'm going to use the word go broke. And this one is typically signed by the superintendent and business manager, CFO, or whoever. I just noted that that was a vacant position, so there would not be a signature on that particular one for this year. But typically, it is signed by whoever your finance person is. Any questions on the resolution process? I don't expect you to have specific questions with just receiving the budget. Now, I'm sure you'll have some questions. I won't be at your next meeting, because I think you said it's what, the 24th?
24th.
Yeah. I'm gonna be on my way to California to catch a cruise. So, I'm not coming back, no.
You think you would be available by?
By phone, yeah, I should be able to. Yeah, because I don't board the ship till the 27th. So.
Okay.
And if you have questions before that you want to ask, you could do it by email if you would like. But I would ask that if you ask a question by email that you CC all your other board members on it, so I can do a reply to all and everybody sees what the answer is. Otherwise, you know, I'm either repeating or somebody asks another question just a little differently. It may look like it contradicts with the question that you asked, and it's just a little cleaner. And my email, well, and I would suggest that you probably run them through Mr. Mader. You know, take and send the email to him. Do you want him to copy me, or are you going to just forward it? But that, see, if you forward it, then I can't do a reply to all. So can we have it be they send it to you with a CC to me?
Sure.
And my email address is Carolyn, spelled CAROLYN1697 @gmail.com. Okay?
Carolyn, I have one question.
Sure.
In the additions, the inserts that we have, the first page is exactly the same. Did we get the right first page? Were there no corrections to that first page?
Let me just.
Because it matches the one that's in the book.
Yeah, I didn't change the appropriation, and it's because when the auditors go to look at the action you took, they expect to be able to match up this to what's in the book. We could not change the book in time for tonight's meeting. So on that appropriations line for the TABOR, the 281,000, I'll reduce that by the 18 and put the 18 up on the fringe benefit line. So I did not change the amount that was appropriated, but the use of fund balance had to go up because we were only asking for authorization at this point for the 350,000. We now know it needs to be the 368,000. So, and in a format that they like because it fits into the audited financial statements. When you got the big list, they couldn't compress it, and when I would run a report for them that would give it in the format they needed, it was always, but is that what you really approved? And especially if the number didn't come out exactly the same as what was approved because changes have been made along the way. So this document will govern. And if there are changes that are made later, they can again say it's revised. But you shouldn't have any reason to have to make a change unless something really unusual happens and you absolutely have to deal with it. Okay?
I have one more question.
Sure.
On page 4,
Okay?
the general fund, we talked about the 350,000.
Yep.
That's what would have to be taken from the current reserve,
Right.
leaving a balance of 281,000 in the fund balance.
On that first page you showed me.
Hmm?
So, but when I go to put the 18,000 where it needs to be, what will happen is on line 2, column H, it'll go up by, okay, section 2 under the expenditures, line 2 is fringe benefits. What will happen is that 1,637,000 will have a plus 18,000 on that line. And what I'll do is reduce that 281,000 by the 18,000 so that your appropriation is still what's shown on that summary you had on this page. Your appropriation will still be the amount that's over here. If you want to see what your ending fund balance is going to be, if you look at that, go to that second page where it summarizes this general fund. What will happen is your expenditures are going to go up by 18,000. Your deficit is going to go from the 350,000 to $318,000. So that means it'll be 1,222,854, which is in this explanation, which I didn't cover in a lot of detail. But on this recommendation for use of fund balance, you can see there's, the first line is what was already in the book, where it showed, 150,000, legal with 1 million, the supplemental change to what was shown in this book. That 1,200,000, that's why I left it as separate lines everywhere, so we could track through it. And I will probably make these changes in the budget, and I guess if you weren't passing a resolution till next time, you could redistribute it if that would be your pleasure.
We can do that, just so it's clean.
Yeah, and I guess if you wanted me to increase the appropriation by the 18,000 and leave the table reserve at 281, I could do that. Just tell me that's what you want, and when I do the revision, I'll leave the table. The 281,000 is what's in your financial statements as your current table reserve. So I can either leave it 281 and add the 18,000 to the budget. If that's what you prefer, I will go ahead and do that. And I'm assuming it sounds like you want to wait till the next board meeting to actually pass the resolution. So I can make that change and you can redistribute it and all the members will agree then. Is that your pleasure? I see a lot of heads shaking yes. Okay.
Good.
All right, I'll make those changes.
I want to ask you a question. I know it's probably going to come up. That 18,000, is that really going to harm us immensely, or is that just going to be like just a little more addition to that 350?
18,000 is a lot easier to deal with than 350. But, you know, if you added 4 or 5 18,000s onto it, suddenly you're going to be up over 400,000. And your 350,000 is going to be to figure out what to do to 1,000. You're probably
That's part of our negotiation with the union.
As I understand the items that are budgeted, as long as we don't exceed what's in that the final column there, we're good. We can go up to that amount, but we can't exceed it. We
Right.
spend less than that, no problem. Just don't go over that amount.
Yeah, that is correct. And so that's what this first resolution does. It caps your maximum spending.
Right.
Okay? And that's the one where, by statute, you cannot spend more than the number that we've approved over here. Okay?
And then one other clarification, I think, for us, we were told a long time back that 350,000, that student fund really didn't exist and it wasn't there and whatever. It does exist and there is money and there are monies that are appropriated for it because the students raise that money.
Right. And that's the 300,000 that evidently, on one of the resolutions along the way, somebody forgot to put the 300,000 in, so they inserted it afterwards. It's legit. You've got to provide for spending an amount of money and potentially spending those beginning fund balances, those beginning reserves. And it's one of the areas you really don't control. I mean, you do through your staff, your advisors, and all that kind of stuff. That's right. You really do see everybody spending wisely out of that account. But for accounting purposes, you want to make sure that you have it covered so you don't have to answer no on that financial accreditation form.
Carolyn, on that though, is that added to our general fund expenditure?
No.
Okay.
That particular fund has no support from general fund. So the only ones that have support from general fund are food has no support. Grants are a break even. What you get in grant money, you spend. Your bond redemption, you pay your debt out of taxes that are collected. Nothing else has a burden or places a burden on your general fund except those transfers to the two funds, food service and co-curricular.
I just wanted, as we talked about that explanation, and we've had other people that have said in the past, well, that's not there, it's really not an expenditure, it's really not an expenditure. It's an accounting principle where you have to put it in there so that the expenditures don't exceed what's in the column, right?
Technically, one of the things I could do under student activities would be to say your revenue is going to be more like what you actually collect, and that way your appropriation wouldn't be quite so high because, your expenditure of 300,000 is a good number, but your revenue, you typically are collecting about 200,000. I probably should bring that down to 200,000, leave your expenditures at at 300,000 and appropriate that 146,000. That would be a more accurate reflection of, what happens, so. I'll make that change when I do this one, because that one is just, it's a real hard one to decide what everybody's gonna do. So you will see some changes, which you shouldn't expect. In general fund, you should expect to see 18,000 flowing here, there, and the end. Under the student activities, you will see me bring down the revenues to like about 200,000, and you got your beginning balances of 146, and so your appropriation is going to be about 346. And they typically spend about around between 200 and 225,000. Okay. I don't think I forgot to tell you anything.
Any other questions on reporting or anything else that you want to ask? What has to go into the state? I think you gave us a pretty clear answer of what has to go into the state as far as.
Yeah, nothing goes, the state doesn't need to receive anything. You need to post it on your website. And technically, your budget posted on the website could simply be this form, but most schools put the whole thing together. I don't know if they post the resolutions. I know some do.
Does that form that you're talking about, that's the state mandated form, does that go up there anywhere? That's just internal?
Nope. This is just the minimum level of reporting that you need to do for the minimum level of reporting that goes with the resolutions. It needs to be summarized at this level to go with this resolution. Technically, the required reporting is that you have the 2 years of the estimate of where you think you're going to end that year, and then what your new budget's going to be. So, limits. One of them, another one on that accreditation form is that have you appropriated your reserves such that when you look at this little table over here, and you see I've got numbers out here that I didn't tell you what those were. This 15%, your 15% is about 1.4 million, and your unappropriated was 960,000. Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll stick around for auditor's findings to make sure you don't need me. Other than that, will I be excused when that's done?
Yes.
Did I need to stay for anything else?
Just for that, I think you've already gone into 5.2 fund, right?
Because I can stick around a while. It's just I don't want to have to charge you for it.
I think after the auditor finding, you can
Is
take
there
off.
anything
Yeah.
else on that, Deb, you wanted to know about the reporting requirements or?
Well, I think the only question that stands out in my mind, and we touched on it, was the balance of the reserve for long term rather than just this short term that we're talking about. So we know what that reserve.
1.2.
Yeah.
1.240854.
Right, 122,854. If you look at this, the use, and it's got a little table, it actually would go down to 1,222,854.
I wrote that, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that's the number. Yeah.
That's what was in.
Without
half
without spending the table reserve,
Okay.
you would have 1,222,854.
After the 368,000.
Yes, yes. That's what will happen when you see it the next time. I'll redo the resolutions too to put them both together since I'm redoing the budget for you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Jesse, on the auditors finding, you had a meeting with the auditors, I think?
I met with Mr. Dixon. Let me first say that I'm not comfortable talking about the subject because I made an inquiry based on some allegations that I heard while attending board meetings about budget irregularities that concerned me, and I thought I would make a cursory review of what was said, and find out if there was any substance behind those allegations. At the tail end of that, I had occasion to meet with Mr. Dixon, our auditor. I basically had two questions for him. That was, I relayed to him what I had heard at board meetings and from Ms. Gardner, actually, about budget irregularities, and asked Mr. Dixon if he suspected or observed or thought that there were any budget irregularities at any time in the recent past, or as long as he could go back, which is a long time. His answer was simply no. That was a general question. I never did ask him about the specific allegation, but I think Carolyn answered the main reason why the initial allegation was made, because Ms. Gardner couldn't find that number or line item, and there was a very innocent, turns out there was a very innocent omission, and so my report is simply that in trying to protect the school district, in trying to protect the school board, I thought it was appropriate to do that. I was asked to make this report simply because I reported to Mr. Mayor what I heard after my discussions with Mr. Dixon, and apparently he thought it was important that also what I told him be brought to the board.
And I think the reason that Ms. Garner probably, well, the reason she couldn't find it is because that student activity fund doesn't have a profit and loss statement like all the rest of your funds do, where it shows revenues and expenditures. It's simply a balance sheet where you have a balance and you have a deposit and you have checks written and a new balance. So she would not have been able to find that budgeted amount that I'm telling you that we do it, because at the end of the year, when we get ready for the audit and to be able to prepare the audited financial statements, we run a report to determine how much was deposited, and that we reclassify and call it revenue. One line. And we run a check register, and that's what was dispersed, and that becomes the expenses. The other items are merely interest income and some fees sometimes for check printing and stuff like that. So in what she was looking at, she could not see your typical revenue and expenditures budget, just because that particular fund doesn't report that.
I think as she looked at that number, she eliminated the thought that it might be a mistake or innocent. She had some creative, imaginary things going on in her mind.
Yeah. So I can understand how she arrived at that conclusion.
Anything else, Mr. Engineer?
No, that's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, item 23, CASB, Superintendent Search Information.
We have a CASB employee here tonight, John Marion. John Marion was a long-time former superintendent in the state, many years in Florence. And how many years in Florence?
37.
Long-term superintendent, that's what you're looking for in this district, 37 years from now. And so John's gonna fill you in, and I've known John a long time. John's gonna fill you in on the CASB search, what they do, and the different search categories, from maybe a full and everything, at the most half an hour, so we are not here. But go ahead, John. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
you don't feel.
Thank you, Carol.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm going to try to break Carolyn's record in terms of two things. Number one, the time factor and the complexity of what I'm going to be sharing with you. I remember now why I retired as a superintendent. That budget and the statutory requirements of the state of Colorado make it difficult. My name is John Marion. I worked in Florence for 37 years as a teacher, a coach, an athletic director, a principal, and ultimately as a superintendent. So I've kind of seen this business from the bottom up, and I've become more knowledgeable and more of an expert since I retired because I have fewer people questioning my decisions. I'm recommending retirement, by the way. Anyway, I work with Colorado Association of School Boards. I'm an independent contractor. I'm not employed by CASB. CASB has 5 consultants around the state of Colorado that they call when they have the need for a superintendent search. We are paid as a private contractor. My job tonight is to share with you, I think in brevity, what a search entails. I know you have a lengthy agenda tonight. You have very important decisions to make, and in respect to your time and the weight of the decisions you have to make, I'm going to make this as brief as I can, but as clear as I can, and hopefully give you the opportunity to examine what CASB has to offer, and then have me back here. I can come back as often and as needed to pursue this process if indeed that's what you choose to do. Superintendents throughout the state of Colorado, 176 school districts, change about a third a year. And in rural school districts, those numbers seem to be bigger than they are in the metropolitan school districts. 2.5 to 3 years is usually the tenure of a superintendent in a rural school district. People who stay longer than that either can't find another job or their family won't let them leave. Both of those things were true in my case. What I have given you, you have a packet, and CASB has a pretty complex and lengthy step process in terms of the 7 steps we would follow in doing a full search. But what I found in my work with school boards and committees that I work within communities is that if I can put this in real time, and I can show you what the sequence of steps would be in a typical search, the time allowance necessary for each of those functions within that time frame, I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand. So what I did is I sat down and worked out a customized timeline for you. I don't know when you might make this decision to embark upon a search, but if you started tonight, again, this is hypothetical, if you started tonight, this is what it would look like. If you choose to start at the end of the month when you have another regular board meeting, I can make adjustments and I can come back and spend much more time with you at that time to really delve into the details of a search. I'm not going to get into the interim search because I think that's another category that you may be considered, but I have some background in that area as well. I can help you with some questions you might have, but CASB has a pool of candidates that they would draw from that would make the interim search much, much more brief, and you could have a person on board within a month. This search takes about 3 months. If you look at this is probably the most expedited search we could do in the time we have, and if you started today, you wouldn't announce your superintendent until April 16th. A lot of that is controlled by state statutes, and there are statutes in the state of Colorado specific to superintendent searches. So it is so critical that not only you do the due diligence in terms of defining a profile, finding the right person, getting that fit between that right person and this community and this district, and then following all the rules. And that's where CASB and the consultants that work for CASB can walk you through that step by step, be here working with you on every little detail through the completion of the process. And I can do that. Carolyn lives 10 miles from where I live. She drives faster than I do. She'd get here faster. But take a look at this. The steps include commitments from the Board of Education and direction to the consultant from the Board of Education. As I said before, I don't work for CASB. Once CASB identifies me as a consultant and assigns me to a district, and that Board of Education accepts me as a consultant, then I work for you. And I have access to all of CASB's resources, which includes online application programs, all the publicity you would probably need, the solicitation opportunities to get the word out to a national audience online, to the legal steps that would be taken. We have legal authority that would step in and take care of any problem we might have through the entire process. They wouldn't be here, but they would empower me to share that information with you and make sure we followed all the steps. You would make decisions. When we have the time to sit down and really orchestrate this and really design it for your specific needs and your time frame, I would ask you several questions. Do you want to involve the community and the staff in this process? That's a critical step. And it not only gives you a broader audience and a broader viewpoint of what you might be looking for, it provides some buy-in. If you include people in your community, in your school district, in various phases of the process, you're ensuring more clarity, you're more open, and the information is so vital to those people putting together the process and the profile. So a focus group would be so very important. Before we even started putting the concept together and identifying what we possibly are looking for, I would spend time in your community, with your staff, with your administrative staff, and opportunities for the community to share information directly with me. I would come down at a separate time to do that. Once I gather all that information, I will present it to the board and give you a scenario of what your community is looking for. And then we would sit down and spend probably 2 hours in a workshop putting together an application and a brochure advertising the position. And I gave you a sample of a brochure in your packet. This is from another school district, but this is the format that would be used. Of course, it would be purely customized to you, and the information on front and back would be determined by you. This goes out online. It's also sent to about 100 superintendents in the state of Colorado who might be interested in applying, and we send a hard copy to every school district in the state of Colorado. But I would tell you that 99% of the solicitation and the contact we get comes from the online process. That's how people look for jobs today, especially superintendents. They're on the line. They're looking at CASB, they're looking at CDE and CASE, and we employ all of those websites to get the word out. Then we use an online system called School Spring to have people apply. So for the solicitation period, which is anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, applicants, candidates are applying online. The minute the deadline that you determine for the completion of applications, you immediately have access as board members online to all of those applications. I would then come down and we would do a screening. We would go through every application. I can help you with that. I can shorten the process, or I can facilitate as in-depth search as you want to do in terms of those applications and those candidates. After you then would select semi-finalists, and that would be 5 or 6 people that you think you might be interested in, I would go back and do in-depth background research. Probably about 6 or 7 days later, I would come to you with a very detailed report on each of those candidates. In executive session, I would share with you what I know, what I hear, the good points, and I'll find 10 good points on every candidate and 10 concerns, and I'll find 10. Red flags will come up, and if there are radical concerns about any of the events of the candidate's history, you will know it. and I'll share that with you. I have to warn you that all of this information up to that point is highly confidential. We can't even share with you who's applying, because those people who are applying are protected by Colorado and federal law relative to confidentiality of their background. Until they're identified in the state of Colorado as a finalist, or you get down to 3. The magic number in the state of Colorado is 3. Once you have narrowed it to 3, you're obligated by state law to declare those people finalists. And at that point, information on their applications, with 2 exceptions, are open for public review. Now, that doesn't mean their backgrounds are published in the paper. It means that people who might want to review a candidate's application and resume have access to that, guarded access to that. Things like medical health information that is privileged information. That can't be shared. And letters of recommendation are also privileged according to the state of Colorado. Board members have access to all of those things. The community does not. Usually the community would be involved in screening and interviewing. And again, that's entirely up to the Board of Education, because statutorily, you are not only responsible, but you are the only group in this structure that has the authority to hire a superintendent. Now, you can ask for help, and you can use other resources to derive decisions, but only the Board of Education can make that final decision. And only that superintendent is your employee directly. So, again, the consultant's job is to walk you through the entire process. You will tell me how you want to structure your search. Do you want to involve staff and community members in screening and interview teams? If you do, I will come and I will bring those people together, I will train them, and I'll develop the process directly with that group so they understand their ramifications of rules and regulations and confidentiality, and only they can advise the board. It purely is an advisory role in terms of their insight of the candidates that are in that, because it is a 3-month process and it does take time and there are steps that have to be followed. But my job and CASB's job would to make it as easy as we possibly can to get you to that point where the information is all in front of you. I think the value of having people who've been in the business and the resources of CASB is that we kind of know who to talk to, who to ask. When I do background checks, for example, I only call 2 people that the candidate recommends, just to confirm that they know them. I'll call 3, 4, or 5 other people that I may know, or that CASB may know, or that somebody that I know knows, to find out other information. If a flag comes up, I follow it. If I tell you there's a red flag, I'll give you 2 points of view. The candidates and the person who's making the accusation. You'll hear both. And sometimes it's not clear. And sometimes it's not legally determined, but you'll know. And I've gone as far as 5 or 6 steps in pursuing with the Board of Education and direct resources or references of a candidate to get to the bottom of a questionable flag. That's basically what it is. So, again, I just want to tell you that if you choose to do this with CASB, take a look in the packet. There's a contract. Certainly it isn't tonight. It's not on your agenda, and it wasn't approved as an agenda item, but you need to take a look at this. The cost of doing business with CASB is a set fee. They're going to charge you, because of the size of your school district, $9,000 to do the search. They pay me a portion of that. And again, they're going to tell you that it might cost you $1,500 in expenses. And the only expenses I'm going to incur is driving back and forth. I won't charge you for meals. I won't charge you for printing. I won't charge you for anything except my mileage. So it might cost you $700 for additional costs. That's kind of where we are. Are there any questions?
I don't have any. Pretty clear.
Well, then where's Carolyn?
Yeah,
We had a lot of questions.
She had a good jump on you.
Well, that would be the other question of Carolyn is obviously the $10,000 where do we get it?
Yeah, I think I heard where you could find that.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And let me ask you, Mr. Montero, do you want me to stay for the next step?
Well, you had mentioned something about that for the official search parties. You said you can help us with the interim search as well?
CASB can, or if CASB chooses and you choose to have a consultant do that, I can help you with that. It's much more abbreviated than this.
Cost-wise?
Cost-wise is costs. I don't think they charge you a fee to do an interim search. But I think what CASB would do is send you a pool of candidates that have been proven, tested, and have been interims from time to time throughout the state of Colorado. And there are some that just do that. They retired maybe 15 or 20 years ago, and they continue to do this, and they do an excellent job. We wouldn't send you somebody that wouldn't be highly qualified.
I thought we already checked on that though, and they said there were none available for our area.
I did check, I did call Randy back and to try to get approval of candidates, and he said that approval is pretty dry right now, John, so.
Well, and that's, I think, indicative of what's going on in the state of Colorado right now with changes that are occurring at local districts. And again, I would tell you that of the 5 people I've worked with who are interim, they probably are busy. At a very, very, we could help. CASB could help pursue the options that you might have.
We've already, obviously, we opened that as soon as we found out, internal and external. Already been advertised, and we have a number of applicants back out there to look at. When you mentioned it, it just piqued my interest, that's why I asked.
Well, and again, there's lenient. The only rule that probably really exists is a 14-day wait rule. And that means from the time you formally announce a person as either a single finalist or as a finalist, you cannot appoint that person to their position for 14 days. And that was put in place so backroom overnight decisions couldn't be made between a candidate and the Board of Education without the community and the school district knowing who those candidates are. It's worked effectively for both boards of education and for candidates, because you want to keep their reputations clean also.
And there's not a fee attached to the interim process with CASB?
Not unless you specifically ask for a consultant to be involved, and it wouldn't be the same price as a full search. I don't know what it is. It's hard when I don't know what it is.
Yeah, if we exhausted that, we didn't get from that.
Rangeley, Lamar, I've been to Sterling, Trinidad, Henry Roman, and I kind of work the southern Colorado area, and Henry has declared a conflict of interest in working with Trinidad because he's the BOCES director for South Central, and he'd be actually hiring the person he works for, or the Board of Education he works for, so there could be a problem with that. But Henry and I pretty much do the southern part of the state. We have a gentleman from Longmont who does the northern, and we have an outstanding woman from Grand Junction that's doing searches now on the western slope. But, you know, if this doesn't work, CASB can find somebody. They'll make sure you get some qualified person to help you.
Would you be available to consult the board in the interim search?
I would.
And then the last one, the timeline there, obviously related to that, tonight, our next board meeting is the 24th. If we were to decide to do this on the 24th with you, with CASB, would that just move everything back like 2 weeks on this, basically?
Yeah, it would. And again, there's a couple of ways we could kind of hedge that. I built 6 weeks of solicitation time in from the time we announce the position until we declare a deadline for that position. If you felt you needed to, you could go to 4 weeks. I don't think you gain anything. I did one in 2 weeks. And only the reason they did the 2 weeks is because they had some local candidates that they felt were going to be adequate, more than adequate. So I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. I'm doing 2 other searches, and I could make it work. I'm kind of working this calendar around 2 other searches that I'm doing right now, but I can comfortably handle 3, and I'd be happy to work with you. Okay?
Anybody else have questions?
Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Yes, John?
Okay, that leads us to the next item, which is the interim superintendent process and any information. Yeah, want to take, why don't we take just a 5-minute break if you don't mind while we gather
Can we
ourselves?
just finish that? I just had one comment. I would be prepared to vote on that at the next meeting. I don't know how you guys feel about that. And I would just remind us that we do have a funding source, being that we didn't have a finance manager, and part of the superintendent's contract that will be finished to compensate for that search. So I would be prepared to vote on that at the next meeting so that the timeline would fit into ASAP.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as, if you wanted to amend the budget right now to vote on that, we could vote on that.
I'm just saying,
now.
I don't even think it's gonna take to amend the budget, like the $18,000, because we already have those salaries built in that we already have not used, which will more than compensate for the fee of this.
I would think so.
Casual search.
With the CASB search, we've got the interim position that we would have to pay for at some point in time.
Right, but we lost, we'll
Those losses in.
Speedy had a safety issue he'd like to address the board. Would it be possible if we could give him 3 quick minutes?
That would have to be a contingent upon board approval, because at special meetings, we don't have any.
Right, and I was unaware of that. School bus.
You want to hear the issue?
I think it's important we need to.
That way they could.
It's okay to.
Yeah, it's, we normally, I don't have the list in front of me right now, but basically, our board secretary, Joel, will time in, give you 3 minutes to make
I
your.
would probably do it under.
Okay, and it'll say, and normally it says inappropriate personal comments are not acceptable, et cetera, so.
I live in Johnson, my name is Al Speedy. The bus has stopped in front of my house for the last 50 years. Our daughter relocated here from the valley. Beginning of the school year, she was given to Colorado. I lived right before Colorado Canyon. She was given to Colorado Canyon. So I called the school, whatever, bus guy. And essentially he blew me off, so I called Massaroli. John called him. I gave him a week to call me back. John called him. Next thing you know, he calls me up, says, yes, it's a safety issue. That highway's too narrow for these kids to be on this highway. And the edge of the highway is about 12 inches from the white line to where the pavement ends, and there's a little ditch. After the first session, the school bus guy calls her and tells her, hey, didn't realize the hazard until she walked up the highway right there. So, in a nutshell, if anyone would like to come and see what I'm talking about, call me and I'll show you. But I'm asking the board to reconsider the bus stop. My kids caught the bus there. Henry St. Stephen's kids has caught the bus there up to a couple of years ago. At that point, there was no other kids to catch the bus. But I just would like to get that stop put back, because I know there's kids coming up that live behind me that will have to walk up the highway if that bus stop's not put back. Here guys are going to work. at that time of day. So it's a real busy highway, one distracted driver, and that's the end of it. Coming home at night, she's walking, it's not wide enough right there.
blinding.
Yes. So I would just ask the board to, whoever's timing, I'm sorry. But I just ask the board to reconsider. Thank you.
Is there a location for that, or?
67.4 is the closest road to my home. My home is right off Highway 12.
It's right there at the old.
Valenti store. Actually, I used to have the kids stand on the porch of the store, so in case the car went off, because they've even taken out my mailbox right there. And the mailbox is right before the porch of that store, and that's where I even had a chair for Henry's wife, so when she walked the kids down, they could stay not away from the highway.
I think it's appropriate. Ramon Zamora has some information about this, some restrictions that we're living under because of this, and I think it would be appropriate for Ramon, our lead bus driver, to respond. Is that okay with you? All right? Here, Ramon.
Good evening. 67.4, I'll read the regulation from CDE. It's rule, it has to have a 500-foot distance from stop to stop. I looked at it, and at the time that Mr. Masrodi had contacted me, I hadn't looked at it then. But then what happened was, the driver came up to me, and he told me what was happening. And actually two drivers, the regular driver and the sub-driver. And what had happened is, he dropped their daughter off, and then right away they have to put their yellow hammers on right away. And by the time they do that, they're almost at that next stop, Colorado Canyon. So what happens there is a couple of times some rigs have almost back-ended the bus. So he told me he thought there was a regulation that stipulates that. So I went back in and I looked through all the books and all the guidelines. There is, and that's that 500-foot regulation. So I did two things. I drove out there and I measured it, and I went onto Google Maps and I measured it there. Both times that came up within 300 and some feet. I don't know the exact because I wasn't prepared for this tonight. So it was 300 and some feet. So by CDE rules and regulations and also the federal rules and regulations, which are the same thing, we cannot have those stops together. If it was city, then it would be fine because that's over 200 feet difference. But for the safety issue, that is why I moved 67.4 and I brought it up to Mr. Mader. We made that decision to move it to the Colorado Canyon stop. However, if I may, Colorado Canyon is here, and then 67.4 is right here. On the back, and I wanted to check this out before anything's done. This 67.4 comes back like this, back into Colorado Canyon. And I'm not telling anybody how to do anything. So that's why I felt like if students are being dropped here, and then we have students that are walking in this direction, students walking in this direction, and specifically in this direction, there is access back this way, so that way they're off of Highway 12 over here walking on the shoulder. Yes, he is correct. That shoulder right here where the white line is to the end of the is not very wide. Right here, it's grass, ditch, and stuff. We've had good weather, I understand that. But part of that decision was because of this back here and the safety factor of the 500 feet here needed between the two spots here. Questions?
So the children would have to walk around the other side to get to the other stop then?
Yes.
Avoid Highway 12?
Yes.
How far is that?
There's like a 10-degree grade coming off the other side to get to Colorado Canyon.
I took the little brown car, I don't know if most of you know that Chevy Lumina. I took that brown car back there. I didn't have any trouble.
You should have walked it and checked the dogs.
I could walk it, I don't have a problem. I walk on a farm and a ranch.
I do have one question. The next bus stop past Colorado Canyon is within 500 feet too.
And that's the next one I'm looking at too.
Yeah, but
Because
that'd be unsafe to take that.
Highway 12. I would suggest Colorado Canyon, 67.4 if you want to put that back in, but I would suggest no because of that rule and regulation. the other one's down further, take Highway 12, eliminate it, make one stop either by Bob and Earl's off the highway or down further just off the highway, one or the two. So that way, and it'd be off the highway, something similar distance.
Can we apply for an exemption from the state or? if there-
I looked into that. The only exemption would be a state wildlife. If there was a wildlife issue, say bobcats, mountain lions, bears, that's the only exemption.
There's no exemption or waiver that could apply to children because of the terrain there and the space of the road?
I didn't see anything like that. I could look some further into that, but I didn't see anything like that.
Again, we would ask, thank you very much, thank you, Mr. Councilman. But we need to turn this back into the administration to take care of, and look into this further. Maybe walk that off, maybe get together and visit the rest of the administration. Good, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, great. Recess. Yes, let's take a recess. I'm glad you said that. Thank you.
What do you want me to do in the seat you
I have to
want?
sit back.
I can do that in the seat
Well, that's
behind
why
you.
we have those things, you know, I was wondering what those were for.
We done that pretty much.
I just wanted to let you know the camera's live right now.
That's going on.
Good luck tomorrow.
Thanks.
Leave it then.
Yeah,
Good luck.
Bert knows it.
Despite everything, just keep making those hurdles. Did you have a good holiday?
Oh, yes.
Oh, God. Josh and his family came and had Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and then out the next day. I have not had that much food and fire. I did Christmas Eve, just all stayed there, we stayed in the jammy, put the turkey in, put the ham in, cooked breakfast, and the dishes just stayed. I said, I can do that. Yeah. I did, I told her, excuse my dishes, but I'm not gonna spend my valuable time with you doing dishes. Have all week after you leave tonight. So there was a big pile there. But it was good. It was so good. He said to tell you why, by the way.
Thank you.
Mine was just like, he was just like a little. 10 times smarter, just a little bit. So, we have a good, really good. Big cards and battleship and. And then he has a adopted daughter that will graduate this year. So, but he's been with her since she was 3, so he's like her. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's very good.
How long are you there? Is there already a pool of that food for the year?
The last I heard. I think we did it at the last meeting. We did the last meeting.
But no, because the last meeting they were wrong.
They were wrong. What they decided at the last meeting is those have to go through December, and then the new ones, but when I talked to Gloria, they hadn't been signed, so she can't pay the new one until they're signed.
No, remember you guys
a regular.
No, remember you guys, I So I sent Gloria the signed contracts, but then I had to type the new ones for you guys, and you were gonna approve the new ones tonight. I gave it to Mr. Ritter, like, last week, and told him and Diane to put it on the agenda. Because you know the new PPOR changed, right? So I adjusted them for you, for Cog and Head Start, so it was the right amount. And I gave them to you to put on the agenda for tonight, so you guys would have those new agendas for the board to approve them.
When I asked Gloria, she said they hadn't been signed. So
Well,
I-
those haven't been signed because you guys don't have them yet, the new ones.
Right.
And I sent Gloria the old signed ones, so you should be able to get paid.
We do.
Okay.
But
But the new ones are
September,
supposed to,
September and October, but she's looking at cash flow.
let me ask Diane, because that was supposed to be on the agenda tonight, because I knew you needed the new contracts.
We did talk about that.
Diane,
Because I was at the agenda meeting, we did talk about it, but I don't know when it's on.
so,
The other thing is our consultant, he said if we didn't want to move back and take action on that tonight, we'd be willing to stay and we could move on that tonight if you guys want to. He would also listen to what we're going to do on the generals, and he would be willing to answer that if we want to be on the regular as a consultant, so we want to spend anything to help with that.
That was gonna be my next one. It's not gonna cost us that much. That's only a resource to utilize. And say that we exhausted everything, so I'm ready to
He
move
said
on.
he said some interim stuff.
I just saw it was in the non-action items and I didn't have any.
We don't have everything in the
Action
agenda.
items.
Recall it. No, yeah, no, that's.
It's an action item.
There's an action item that says information. We could convert that if we wanted to by a motion. I am. I'm already going to
Moving on to still on the
Moving to,
interim.
moving to.
You bet. Move on the interim as well.
He said to stay here and listen to what we have for.
We're watching there.
That's
The expenses that he said is cheaper than on the state, so.
Okay, we'll get back, bring our meeting back to order, and I would ask for a motion to amend the agenda. Motion, that's a second, and discussion. Roll call.
Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Mr. Quintero?
Yes.
Mr. Rossetti, or Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Okay.
Paul, did you make it known on the recording that Mr.
Hold on.
Rossetti left?
Yeah, on the recording, Mr. Rossetti had to leave for personal reasons, so he left at the time.
Because of
illness. Okay, so now going back to the, I'd like to hear a motion then to go ahead and employ our consultant and CASB, and consultant, or however that means. Need a motion and then we can have a discussion.
So we would be entering into a contract with CASB.
It's actually
The superintendent search and maybe the interim search as well, is that correct?
Well, would we be entering into the contract with you or with CASB?
Oh, let's do this. I'll come down on the 24th and start the long-term search process, which means on the 16th, I'm going to get with Scott and Diane, set up a schedule and come down and do focus groups. And I want to work with administration, I want to work with staff, and I want to have an open session for community, all in one day. So when I come back to you on the 24th, I'll have that information. We'll start working on the long-term search, and then at no additional cost to you that night, I'll work with you directly on the interim process.
But do we have to make the motion
That's
with the
what-
contract with?
You're not gonna contract with me at this time.
How about Casby?
You would contract with CASB for the long-term search, for the full-time replacement. When I come back on the 24th, we'll talk about what that might look like. If we could synchronize it with my visits here for the long-term search, we don't charge anything for that. If I have to come back for various things, there would be a direct charge for my services for those issues. And I'll clear that with CASB. I'll make sure you either pay CASB and they pay me, or you pay me, whatever they want to do. But let's wait until the 24th to talk about that contract,
The interim.
the interim. Okay, is that okay with you?
But it's okay to make the motion for the contract for the
Casby.
For the
That would start the process.
Okay,
That would get
that's
me
the
all
motion
over.
we had.
That's the motion we have.
So we can vote on
Contract.
Yeah.
This is with Casby,
That
not the
contract with
individual.
Casby.
Yep, Casby.
Okay, we got the motion,
No,
any
I-
other discussion?
It's with this.
Roll call.
Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Okay, now going to the next item on here, which is the interim superintendent interim superintendent process. And we're gonna talk about that as information, but now we have an additional resource to utilize while we're here. So, let's open the discussion on that, the process.
I think that way we get for his out.
Well, it's just saying that we're gonna,
Yeah, you'll be here on the 24th, and you'll be able to help us with that process on the 24th, right?
Right.
This table that.
I could answer questions you might have. It's an open question issue tonight.
Okay, yeah.
That might help you get between now and the 24th.
Should we be doing, as I mentioned, I think Diane, you said we had, we had 4 or 5 applicants extra, I don't want to names or anything, because it's public, but.
Right, they're right here.
One thing I'd say is my last day is the 31st. Don't you want to start that process before the 24th?
The question I
That
have.
he has 14 days, he has to wait for, he or she have to wait 14
That's for
days.
the
No,
permanent
that's for
superintendent.
the.
No, that's, yeah, the interim.
That's true of an interim. It would be like hiring a single candidate, a single finalist. You're still obligated to wait the 14-day period.
Even for the intern? Okay, all right.
So,
well, we don't really contract for the interim anyway, do we? Is there a formal contract? Yes. Okay. But we can start that process.
It very well could be a per diem contract. I mean, Mr. Manzanares would know more about that than I, but there's a lot of ways you can structure that.
We've had contracts in the past.
okay, we had 4 or 5 candidates, out-of-house candidates. And in-house, we had, so you'll know, rather, I think we have one individual who submitted, I'm not gonna mention any names because it's public, but we have one individual who submitted an internal applicant. And we also have an application that's written up as a proposal from 3 individuals. And I think we need to look at all of these as, obviously, do we think they're viable methods that we can follow to get where we're going. And I don't know if you have any comments on that. That you'd like to-
Well, I'll be here the 16th. And I could be here all day long to do not only the focus groups. Focus groups take me about 90 minutes each, so I could get here earlier and start working with a board member. It would be a board meeting, but I could start providing some support that might be helping either the administrative staff or a board member in developing the process.
Would everybody be amenable to sitting down on the 16th as a board, just do a special meeting and sit down and talk about the interview process?
That's a Wednesday.
Wednesday?
And Ms. Schiff, for Tuesday,
Is it?
I think it's Tuesday.
That's
isn't it?
Tuesday.
Oh, because that's even better.
Tuesday, does that work? We could actually just call a special meeting and I'll be here.
Okay.
You tell us what time, that we probably need.
I would say if we could meet at 10 o'clock in the morning with the board.
Joe's got a business.
Not a little after 10.
Yeah. You tell me.
I think I'll be here by 10:15 then.
Well, you tell me when you want me to be here. I was planning on starting Scott, just for you and Diane's purpose. I was thinking if I could start meeting with administrative staff at 2 o'clock, then at 4 o'clock I would meet with staff, and then at 6 o'clock that night I would have an open session with people from the community that want to come in. Now the challenge between now and then is getting the word out to those parties that they're going to be actively involved in the search process, and it's very important to get their input. It's very important.
So if we met at, say, 10:30, would that work with you, Jim? And of course, with Dan, I think you have to talk with him because he has to get time out because he works also. The rest of us are retired. So
Anytime after 10.
10:30.
10:30 to 12, would that
You
slot
just
work for you?
email me, Scott, remind me. I'll be here. I'll be here and I'll spend the day.
If that's okay with everybody, we'll have Diane post a special meeting for the Board of Education to confer with the consultant on the interim superintendent search process. Okay, that will describe our contents of our special meeting. Now, once we are in executive session, because we're back there doing other things, we could talk in personnel if you wanted to look at the applications back there.
How many out-of-district applicants were there?
I want to say 5 or 6, but I can't remember what line from the form.
Seven.
Oh, okay. I'll 7.
Don't our policies dictate that if we have personnel within the district that are qualified, that we look there first before we go outside?
No,
We do that for most positions. That's not for the superintendent's position?
that's because you contract with teachers and staff to do that, or you have a board policy with.
I'm sorry, I thought our policy said any vacant positions in the district, that we would look at qualified applicants from within the district first before we went outside. I don't think it says, it just says any vacant position in the district. If there's qualified applicants within the district, that we would look at them first.
Well, you could be right, I'll have to look at that.
I think really it is, I think that you change that policy, say you can go inside and outside for.
Or the applicant pool, if there's qualified candidates, then we could look at filling the position within rather than going without. And I think Mr. Merriam indicated that he's quite successful with doing that as well, so.
Yeah, we can look at the policy.
Or the minutes, because I think it was discussion at a retreat, and we decided to, in order to get the best qualified candidate, just to do a one-time thing rather than a process of two, to the best of my recollections.
I think you might have, normally, I think we do post it in-house and out-of-house at the same time, all of our positions, and that's to save time. And if there was an in-house candidate that was qualified and we wanted to hire him, we would go with that first. But in this case, I think it was mentioned, like you said, at the retreat, that we wanted to look at all of them, all of the candidates at once, to make sure we got the best persons for the job.
I think I initiated it. I think that's all I remember.
Yeah.
Did we take action at a board meeting to change that with policy?
So,
I
I don't know how many meetings we have to go back to
don't know.
check that
I
out.
mean, if we wanted to, we could just do it right now. That's okay. Okay, so, anything else on the interim superintendent process / information? Okay. Diane, would you make sure and schedule that special meeting 10:30 with those qualifications of what we're gonna do, please? 360 engineering report. Everybody's got one of those in your packet. And I was sad to see that Ben had to leave when he did, but because he's been involved, he and I are the two board members that are involved with that. If you turn back to the pages, I think I can carry us through, and Scott's been in on that, so you can fill us in. Thank you. Is everybody here on the 360?
Is that best grant?
Yeah, that's the best grant. Yeah, I'm sorry, we had one best grant overview. Yeah. Basically, what's happened, and if I could please just, we've met either together in this building or by phone with Weston, who's the engineering person with 360, talking about the project. And what they did is they went through and looked at everything that needed to be done within the district. They did a complete analysis of all of our buildings within the district.
Yep, about that last time.
And then, so what they came back with was a recommendation now, and they're saying, they think that their recommendation, not they think, their recommendation is that we go forward with the middle school as our best grant, application to do the remodeling, revitalization of the Trinidad Middle School. And if you'll note in there, a couple of things that I think are important that grew out of our last meeting, it says, future use of the renovated middle school facility will be continually analyzed over the next 3 to 5 years by the Trinidad School District Board of Education and Administration based on certain metrics, including but not limited to enrollment trends, budgetary restrictions, space utilization, square foot per student, educational programming needs. And it says that the renovation of the facility will ensure the district has a modern K-12 space for both growth or consolidation scenarios in the coming years. That statement was put in there very end, and no decisions have been made regarding what that facility will be used for. The main thing is now that facility needs to be taken care of. It's a 1911 building, and if we don't do something with that pretty soon, it's going to be a pile of bricks somewhere. Something's got to be done to take care of that. There's life safety issues in there, there's security issues in the building and so on, that all have to be addressed. And that's part of the proposal. And Jeff, you were also in on that. Am I covering?
No, it sounds like you did about it.
The bottom line that they want from us, what 360 is asking, is now they have to put a tremendous amount of work into the detail. They want to make sure that this board is saying, yes, that's where you want us to go. You want us to concentrate on the Trinidad Middle School building, go in for the best grant application for that building. Then they'll go even to more detail than what you see that's added in here. You know, they talk about the HVAC system, they talk about the foundation. For instance, the foundation, there's been some water seepage, if you will, into the foundation. And they put a big number by that because they don't know until they actually pull back that dirt around there whether or not there's going to be structural issues in there. And stop me if I'm wrong, or Jeff, on this. If there's going to be structural issues or if it's just going to be a building wrap to seal it. They don't know that at this time. So they put that amount of money in there to cover that. Part of what's going to go into this, and I think Ron's going to give them the information on the technology part of it, the technology piece. You can actually wire technology into a best grant. The other things that were stipulated was that there be STEM labs or labs in that building, so we can have updated science labs available to our students as part of the remodeling, and all of that's in here. When they get all done with the specifics that they're going to do here, then they have to go back out and have this reviewed by other engineering firms to make sure that the costs that they are putting into this have been verified externally from another company, basically. And that, so it's a big process, and they want to make sure they can get started on it, because they've got a 23rd of February, that grant's got to be done by. We have to see the complete grant before February the 23rd as a board and approve that so they can go up onto the CDE.
We approve it tonight.
Well, we don't see the whole thing tonight, so see, they've got to go get a bunch more detail.
He wants your approval from the board so he can work on it in more detail. So yes.
You know, tonight,
We just want approval from us so that they can keep working forward.
and
Before it was, the focus was this way, they're focused in this way. And that they are recommending you go this direction, and then for the first phase, and then there'd be another phase later on down the road.
How should we make the motion?
make the motion to allow 360 engineers to focus their best grant on the Trinidad Middle School renovation of this. As a priority one, that's what we want to do. So that they know they can charge ahead of us. So we're moving second. Any discussion?
So when you mentioned the STEM labs, that would be renovating the STEM labs, creating those STEM labs in the junior high, as opposed to what was initially deemed at the high school, right?
Because this would be focused in one building right now, but as we talked today when we were at the negotiation meeting, sitting around the table, I was talking to Chuck about that too. I said, you know, there'd be no reason why if we had 2 good STEM labs in there that our science students from high school couldn't walk across the street and actually participate in that right in this building, because we have it available.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, it's bad, there's gonna be a new lab, I mean, we've gotta have something for our kids to do that, and I think that's, if we can get it in there, let's do it.
I just don't like making that decision without you guys' input, because if there's walking kids over there, I mean, it's one thing to make a decision behind this desk, but it's another decision to implement it, so if you think that's feasible, I mean, that's only a small part of it, I recognize that, but one of the big things that we prioritized last time was those STEM labs in the high school. So that would be a compromise, basically.
And part of that, by the way, I was very fortunate as we were talking about that today, both Dina and Chuck were at the same table, so
Oh,
both of them
good.
heard the same.
Oh, okay, good.
So it worked out pretty well that, you know, we talked questions on any of the scope here, I'm not able to answer or Jeff. So,
363 engineers and will work with an outside organization with the professional engineers and architects. Is that right, then, Jeff?
Yes, they hire their own people to do
So
that.
are they going to evaluate basically what's in here and see what structurally needs to be done then as well?
Yes.
They'll be basically evaluating what 360 did.
No, their architect came down and looked at the building already. So she gave some recommendations on what she thought needed work. Weston wants to know if he wants to move forward with focusing in on the middle school, or if you guys want to do something different, so that they can get ready for the best grant application.
So that,
but the one I think you're referring to is.
they're not leaving any school out there, just want to focus on the middle school first. To get started, they have to have a starting point because of the amount of time they have left to submit it.
Right, and the other part of that, Joe, too, is not only time but dollars. If you look at the bottom line, their best estimate at this time is that this application for best grant is going to be between $13 and $16 million.
And that's just for the middle school.
And that's just the middle school. And then if we go to priority 2, when they looked at the other buildings, they had some priority 2 levels, some priority 3 things that they've identified. Our next piece, once we tell them this, is we've got to get really busy looking at the financing and how we're going to do this mill levy bond issue for our match. Our match is probably going to be between 38 to 45% somewhere, right? Somewhere in that range.
For the 13,000? For the phase 1?
For phase 1, between 13 and 16 million as a bond issue mill levy override. And Mr. Corder was working on some of that right now. He's on the committee as well. And 2 of the thoughts were, if I may digress into that, would be, we currently have a bond that's at about 5 mils. That's the bond that you see in the budget where we're paying off $580,000.
Y'all be paid off in 2020.
2020 will be done, and like Carolyn said, there's a reserve backing that up. So in 2020, we may not have to collect any or very little tax. So if we went with a bond, we could actually possibly use the bond. The mill levy might even be more appropriate if we could go for the right amount of mills to do this, because it would also allow you to be ready for the next stage. Let's say you got a mill levy for 10 years. The first 5 years you could pay this off. Then you could go back to Best and say, okay, we're ready for phase 2 on the high school or Fisher's Peak or whatever it is to fix that up. We've got the bond in place to take care of that. Plus, remember when we wanted to do the mill levy last time, we wanted to use part of that to attract and keep highly qualified staff. If we wrote the mill levy right, we might be able to put that in there too. So we've got to consider whether we want to bond it or mill levy it, and what are the advantages or disadvantages. We got time for that, but that's the next step.
And we have to move fast now to give them the okay
We
to.
brought up about other contractors, $5.5 million to do the HVAC. They go to another outfit, contract pricing validation. That's part of what they do. That's part of, they've already been paid to do this. They get somebody else to come and validate what they've said.
That's why they were hired, so they could do the application for it. And make sure that we got the right amount of money for the best.
Yeah, they said, you don't want to go back after and say, oh gee, we didn't ask for enough money to do this. They've had that happen before. And they said, no.
Did that happen on the last grant cycle?
contractors bid it way too high from what we asked for. I mean, I went back to the state and asked for more money. And that project got cut kind of short at Eckhart at that time.
So do they work then, Jeff, with this specific people that they continually work with, or, you know?
I don't know who they work with, but I guess the question is that they're gonna give the best number possible for the remodel that they can, so that we ask the state for that amount of money. He says, like, just say if we ask for $4 million for AC, and it comes in at 2, then we have extra money to spend elsewhere.
Where do we come in as a district to select who we want to do any installation or any of the work? Because 360 came down to do the estimate and come up with a plan, a master plan. Having that same group that did the estimate for that and do the construction of it, seems to me is kind of like a conflict of interest.
Well, no, it's gotta go out to bid, right?
Yeah, so say we got the money and we got to the point where we're gonna do something. We'd have to have a set of plans drawn up. Everyone would agree on the plans, and those plans go out to bid, and then the contractors all bid on the plans.
360 has the opportunity to actually bid on doing the construction as well, as I understand it.
No, they wouldn't have no say
It's like
so.
a
I'm sorry? They're just a facilitator,
Yeah.
and so the board would decide who we're gonna hire for certain projects. In other words, we'd like,
Yeah, you have to put it on.
that's what I'm saying. So-
Yeah, you put it out to bid, and
No, we're going out to bid, and we can specify things in there if we want, you know, like we always give some certain allotments for local contractors and things like that. We can specify things as a board into that. The main thing is, we can't do anything, just like, you know, the conversation with Weston, and quote me if I'm wrong, is he said, you can sit here and do nothing. Let your facilities master plan just stop, nothing happens. He said you could apply for a best grant and not get it, you're no worse off than you were when you started. He said you could apply for the best grant, get it, go to the voters and ask for a mill levy, you're no worse off than you were when you started. So they're all positive moves, hopefully that the right, it's okay to focus on this building, that's where this board wants to go for it. Get done.
That's the best.
That was my motion.
Yeah, I know. Do you have anything
Yes,
else?
health and safety, and there's a lot of health and safety issues in this building that would qualify for best grant,
Yeah.
as compared to our other schools.
Yeah, because this building is, when I say this building, I mean this part of the building and that part of the building are probably in the worst shape of any of our facilities. So that would probably be one that best would probably fund.
So this is what we have to decide on. All those others are great questions, but that's after this initial thing is decided. That's what we need to decide tonight.
So we need the best grant first.
Yeah, roll call.
Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Mr. Montana?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Excuse my enthusiasm, but it's friendly working on this. Okay, approval of the telephone system. Look at that, he appeared right in the door when I said.
Whoa, magic.
Like magic.
It's like IT. You work magic. I'm gonna give it like Carolyn, I'm gonna take the podium. So in your board packets is the finalized contract for the lease agreement for the phone system. There is one small correction to it. I do have the full copy with me because if you notice the billing address was our old one at Maple Street. And so that has now been corrected. One thing you also notice, if you remember from the last time we did this, the payment was $37,000. We were able to reduce that to right around 34. Because I kind of beat on a little bit, told them if they didn't give me the information I needed, they were going to lose it. So their people moved, and we got a nice little drop into it. Deb had a question last meeting, if we went to a monthly. If we go to a monthly, this makes no sense to me. I'm IT, not finance. We get charged more interest. If we do one annual balloon payment, we're good with that piece. And so we'll stick with one balloon payment. We'll do it in March. Again, I spoke with Lori prior to her retirement. And because most of our funds from the taxes come in February, March, and April, March was the best time for it. Our first payment will be due in March of this year. And there'll be just 5 annual payments for that.
If I remember right, the math was wrong on that proposal, so they're not really giving us another discount. That was the initial discount that was
Actually,
miscalculated on there.
what they did is they charged us interest. on that, and that's what they figured off. That's why the first, the grand slam total was right, and the monthlies were wrong, because they were charging interest. So if you look at the grand slam total, it's even dropped on this one, yeah.
And then what Carolyn was talking about was, that 5-year commitment. So it would be the $3,000 times 5 in the ultimate.
The 37 times 5, yeah, or 34 times 5.
34 times 5, so that's even $15,000 less than the total that we were talking
Originally,
about. Okay,
mhm.
gotcha.
Now, the only problem I have with this, and it's not a problem so much as a concern, as we begin to search for new superintendents, if something similar were to happen with the last one where we have a superintendent who comes in and basically cleans house, I would hate to see that this district to invest 2 years worth of good money and somebody come in and decide that I'm going to get rid of in-house IT, I'm going to farm it out to a third-party company who says, this is too complicated for us to manage, and throw that system out. That is my biggest concern with this right now. Because I hate to see us invest in a time when we have, basically, we're skating on thin ice. We do a project like this, so I don't know if the board is able to put in some type of addendum on this that says this system will be in place till the full paid off, plus a period of time after that, to ensure that we don't make this investment and somebody comes along and just changes direction on us. Because that has happened in the past.
Plus you're gonna be committed to that 5 years of working with the districts, in case that would happen too.
Honestly, I want to stick around here longer than 5 years. That's my plan, to go much longer than 5 years, but that's the best laid plans of my men, you know?
Couple of questions on the application. Is our official name Los Angeles County School District number?
I had that same conversation with Diane yesterday. As to why it is.
You need to change the address as well.
Yeah, I did that already. Yeah, we have an addendum contract. The one I have for Paul to sign and for you, Pat, to sign has the correct address on it. And when I printed that out, I didn't think they would get back to me with the modifications. About 10 minutes after I had printed it out and gave Diane 6 copies of it, here comes the new one. It's like, okay, I'm not going to waste the ink in the paper. We've got the good one.
Okay.
One of the statements I did like in the contract, though, if you read through it, it's about page, I think it's 12 or 14. It says the wet ink copy has to be sent in, which I thought was kind of interesting. In the digital age, they actually want pen, ink on it, and that's when they want to go back to headquarters.
That will refer January 10th instead of January 9th?
Yeah.
I need a motion to approve, and then we can continue discussion.
So moved.
Second? Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on
Time frame on getting it going and producing?
21 days is what they're talking. They said, based on supply and stuff, it could be sooner. And after my little strong arm a little bit the other day, we hopefully can get that done sooner because of the situation we've got with Fisher Street.
Is that where they're going to start, Fisher Street?
We'll do the whole thing. They'll build the whole system, and then, because we'll have to replace what we have existing, so it's going to be like a cutover. So since we don't have school on Fridays, what my plan will be is build all the phones, all 72 extensions, get all those built, and either start on Thursday night or bright early Friday morning, cut the old system out, and then start deploying handsets. And that's what's going to be the time for me is to hit every office, get it plugged in, make sure it fires up and that.
And how did we had the discussion of the budget. I know it was an emergency situation for safety, so we approved it based on that, but did we have any other budgetary discussion on that?
I don't think so, because what Carolyn said was that in Ron's budget right now under technology, we have the money already in his budget for this year to go ahead and cover that first payment of $34,000. So there was no impact, but she had to book it in as 185 or whatever it was, because they have to show it in for continuous. But other than that, we were okay.
Yeah, because I've got to do a bunch of shuffle within line items and move some money around to make sure that we're covered in all areas for that.
For not just this year, but for the 5-year duration.
So then next year when we build the budget, we'll have to build in another $34,000 for the next payment. So yeah, we'll have to as we get started. Yeah. Any other things? Roll call.
Ms. Hartman?
Yes.
Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Okay. Approval of.
Actually, Rob, I got another piece to the phone system. This is a separate item. Yeah. So, and also in your packets, there should be a bid from a company called Path Solutions. for $10,937. So what that is I'd already started working with the network engineers on the phone system. They started looking at our infrastructure, and I knew this was going to be a problem, but it is fairly trashed. And even though I started working on it, starting fixing it up a little bit, as we started looking at it, we have what's called quality of service. There's a bunch of things on the network world, in my world, that if you don't have those in place, the system is not going to run smoothly.
Yeah.
Don't have it in there? Then I don't give that one to you. I thought I did.
I don't have it.
You see all the contracts for the phone and then one.
Yeah, it's be a separate one that looks like that. Have a big blue logo in the upper right hand corner.
Don't have it.
Just a one sheet thing?
Yeah, just a single sheet, correct.
How does this tie back to the system?
It ties back not only the system, but it ties into the whole network. What this does is they started looking at the system and they said, we can go through, analyze your configurations to make sure that when you put this in, you're going to have about as minimal problems as we can incur. 24 hours, 2 solid days, not including travel time to come down and look at it. What the recommendation was to use a company like this. It's a software program that we'll purchase, that will sit on the system, that will go through, analyze the entire network from start to finish, top to bottom. Not only does it do that, it will also monitor the system, because right now I have nothing for monitoring. I have no idea, and we've had this happen at Fisher Speak a couple times, where somebody's literally in one of the closets and unplugged it. And I have no idea it goes down until I get a call from them. So the software package will monitor the whole system. It'll simulate the system, and as we move more and more and more towards online assessment, we don't honestly know if we can handle it. I don't know if Fisher Speak to be able to handle Park when they go full online with it. This type of system will simulate that. To let us know that, hey, this can't handle it. We're going to have to do either infrastructure, we're going to have to do some cabling, we're going to have to break something up. It's a good chunk of change, but it's something that we truly need. And there's money in the budget. Because when I sat down with Carol and Mr. Mader on Monday, we went through the purchases we got. And my budget at the end of this fiscal will be down pretty much to the pennies. But we'll accommodate all the stuff that we need for the new phone system and anything we have coming down the pipe this year.
You know what that, Carol?
Questions? Well, let me get a motion. Well, it's not here.
The cost is still 10,000, sir?
$10,937. It's actually $15,000, but because we're a nonprofit, they knock off basically $4,700 off the price tag for us.
Any software?
Software based. And it's ours forever. That's what's nice about it.
Ron, you're killing us, Smalls.
I know. But then I started thinking about that because yes, I'm asking for a whole lot of money this year, but then I started thinking,
How did you over budget so much that you can afford all of this?
I haven't spent any money on anything over the years.
Good answer.
I'll see all my 6 years I was here before, and the 2 I've been back, I spent like this much. I was like, man, I can ask for one lump sum at a time. I'll say, okay, you're done with me for another 5 years. At least that's what my hope is.
No, that item is not on the agenda, so if we were going to approve that, we have to modify the agenda.
Because all we have is just the telephone
Telephone?
system.
Well, actually, this is part of
Is
the
that
phone
part
system.
of it?
Yeah.
If it's in the budget, I don't see why.
I mean, and it's part of,
We already covered it with Carolyn, and there's money there, and it's just.
And then it'll all be done at one time instead of 2 time frames too.
Okay. You want to have a motion to approve
Move
it?
to add to the agenda.
Move to add it to the agenda?
Second.
Roll call?
You know what they're adding to the agenda, be specific.
We're adding to the agenda approval of the
I don't know how to read it because I don't have the form.
System-
can we do that though,
System
since
analysis
Jan isn't here?
Really good.
Oh, the special meeting.
And it's a special meeting. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, is it part of the telephone system?
It's part of the entire phone system, but it's not part of the Cisco lease agreement.
So we already agreed to do the other part. Can you hold off until
The 24th?
Yeah, we can
Oh,
hold up till
what-
the 24th. Because in fact, I spoke to Mr. Mader about that, and he said, want to throw it on.
Unless you put it on the meeting on the 16th.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all.
Then it could proceed together instead
And the
of.
16th?
Procedure will be okay.
Okay, add to the 16th.
What is it called, the software system?
It's called Pathway Solutions.
Okay. Bus cameras.
So my question on that one's because Ramon had hit me up, Larry hit me up as to where, if they'd allocated the funds and where they were coming from, and to give you guys, because I didn't know if the board actually had the grandstand total on what, because that also got modified because Ramon and I had actually changed the camera totals and the qualities. So we're still looking at 9 cameras. They're about $1,075 per camera. So it's $96.75, and this is one thing I spoke to Gloria a little bit ago, because when they gave us the quote, they have an estimated freight of $176. So a grand slam total of $9,851.73, but didn't know, since they don't give us a solid number on freight, how that might impact what goes into the record.
Okay, but we already approved this purchase, right?
That I don't know. That's what I was told, but I don't know if it was what number was approved, and that was the only question, to make sure we had it in the system. This is what exactly was, and not just an iffy figure.
Sure. I know we approved the bus camera purchase already. Now, if the amount comes up slightly different because of freight charges,
I don't know, it could go up, it could go down. Like I said, that's my only concern with this, is the freight piece behind it.
Have you had the last board packet to see what dollar amount we would have approved? I thought I brought it.
I did not bring
I believe Ramon told me it was like an emergency of about $11,000, so it should be enough to cover it, but again, I didn't know if we wanted to make sure we had all our I's dotted and T's crossed.
I think if, we've already approved the purchase in general with the amount, if the freight adds to it, and we have to do a supplemental approval to approve the additional cost at our next meeting, we can.
As long as it's not over a certain amount, maybe.
That kind of stuff happens. Okay.
I think we should put that special circumstance clause in there, in the motion, like you suggested.
to cover us.
I don't think we did either.
So I mean,
He said that in case another superintendent comes in and.
Oh, you mean for this, no, you didn't.
Did we agree that that should be in there?
no, I mean, for the most part, it's gonna be pretty hard. We're gonna hire that superintendent, and some of us will be here for another couple of years, some of us for another 4 years, so, that happening would probably be slim to none for, the composition of the board. I understand where you're going, because I know we did that, but, no, I don't think that's gonna happen.
Or we could do that at another time, make another motion to
Yeah.
Can we just add that on to the 16th, so we just cover it with what he was gonna do with that other 10,000 we need to spend?
Okay, security cameras, what's the approval of security cameras?
And I apologize for this not getting in there, but keep on going. So, with the expansion of the security cameras and what was originally done, when Siemens subcontracted out, they put in basically substandard equipment within it. The high school I've replaced, since I've been back in the last 2 years, one of the main pieces of equipment I've replaced it 3 times, and right now it's out again.
It's been out since the first of the year, right?
It's been out longer than that.
I mean, since school started?
And not since school started. It's been off and on. I've been able to duct tape and patch it, but I'm not up all the replacement parts that I've got. And so, as the looking at the total, went, again, that much money? One of the reasons is this is not only the high school,
Just kidding.
this is 2 switches at the high school to put them in full. Along with that, middle school needs one, because the one we're adding the cameras that cover on the gym and all the extra of that, we're out of space on that one. And the one at Fisher's Peak, because I was able to, again, duct tape and bubble gum some stuff there, but it's not where things need to be. But also that $1,500 added at that is the warranty on those. That gives us 8x5 next business day replacement for 5 years on that. Because of the situation, because those cameras need to be up and functional basically every second of every minute of every day for our own safety, we need to make sure that those have coverage behind them. And again, I've got the money in the budget to cover that one.
I think the only problem we have here is you got too much money in his budget.
I wish I had more money in the budget. My budget's taking a nice knock this year. I was like, eesh.
And in the budget revisions, they haven't reallocated any of that budget in another direction.
No, when Mr. Mayor and Caroline met on Monday, she says, "Are you sure?" And I've juggled the numbers 2 and 3 times, and I said, going to be down to the pennies come the end of June.
But I still think we can take that superintendent search out of the budget too.
Oh, yeah. He's got a lot of those. Okay, I need a motion to approve, and then we can discuss it, please.
So moved.
Second. We're moving second, discussion.
How long is this gonna take before that these schools get their cameras?
If we get the order, go ahead and get the purchase order cut tomorrow, usually about a week. About a hard rain,
Oh,
about a week.
we approve this one.
Approve it tonight, get the purchase order cut tomorrow. And actually, what we did is when I met with Carol and Mr. Mater on Monday, because I wanted to keep a spare on hand in case something happened, there wasn't, we cut the quantity again. So come start the fiscal order one, so we have one on hand in case something dies somewhere. We're not sitting here, but wait, we actually have an instant, couple hours downtime, most.
We got the money, the security issue is a big thing. I think, we've got to look at, as we said earlier in our meetings, tightening our belt in terms of spending that we don't have to spend. But student security is pretty important.
I don't know, I think they have to rely on kids' cell phone cameras to find out.
And some of the cameras in the high school work, and some don't.
About less than about a quarter.
About half the cameras actually are up and functional.
Yeah.
And part of it, we've had issues where the equipment was placed, is not secure. Students have access to it. And more than once, I went in there and found it off and found it unplugged. And so we're working with Mr. Smithy and the teachers, because the teachers use that as some storage room to see if we can't find a different spot to put that and secure that up. And it's not the first time it's happened. When we put that system in back when Mrs. Mason and Mr. DeAndros were at the high school, kids would go in there and make changes around to it.
They won't be able to do that.
Yes, once we get, well, they'll be able to do it, but once we get everything worked out where teachers are happy with where they can put stuff, Jeff and I are going to lock the system down so that people don't have access to stuff.
Any other questions from us? Nothing impact the law, it's going to impact the budget, but it's not going to, the money's there, so. Have a motion on the floor, roll call?
Ms. Hartman? Yes. Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Okay, enrollment update.
Okay, just enrollment, I think we got it, asked Diane.
Yeah, better find.
I asked Diane to give you got a 3-column page here with the enrollment update. We even got a little more of an update since then. 16-17, you had students of 1,059, 17-18, 985, and 18,998. And then we took, as of today, it's up to 1,002 student enrollment. So the very latest is.
How much of that enrollment are we not getting paid for? That came in after all.
Yeah, our October counts in 985 is that's what we get paid for.
Over 15, 16.
And then,
But we knew that going into this enrollment clause that, it's going to be hopefully next year's enrollment.
right, I think we can get now is good because lots of times just stick around.
That would make it a month.
Going in the right direction.
Well, it just doesn't happen, so kudos to those who are out there doing what needs to be done to get those kids back, so. 15, 16, 17 kids?
Yep, and every school has got some additional enrollments.
That's good.
17 is a good number.
Anything else? Questions for Scott? Okay. 511 and 512 having to do with, basically with Cora requests. We recently received, in fact, just today or just yesterday, we got a second Cora request. And the individual asked for the tape from our board meeting on December the 13th, the minutes for the December the 13th meeting, and a copy of our, as of the day they turned it in. So the only time we don't have a policy as of the day they turned it in. But as Mr. Manzanero
No,
says,
Mr. Montero, I need to correct that. I think we do have a policy that was adopted before the state required one to be adopted, but it's way outdated. For example, charges $1 a page. State now requires maximum 25 cents per page. But so I think, Diane, you will send him the old policy and tell him that the board is considering a new policy.
Because this one was adopted in 2005, and when I was looking for it, I wasn't looking for it under this, I mean, this public's right to know freedom. I didn't, that, like, I didn't look for it under that. So then when I went to look for the updated one on the CASB website, then I got KDB, went to our policies and found this outdated one, so.
So whatever we got on file is what we have to send to the lawyer that requested this.
Yeah, we'll send him your policy and we'll notify him that that's updated. The board is considering on final reading in the near future a new policy.
Okay. Everybody had a chance to kind of look at the new policy, and I guess there's probably a regulation, yeah, go with it.
And I think that the maximum there is 25 cents a copy on the new policy.
And the old policy, for example, didn't say anything about the search and retrieval fees. The new policy allows, if it takes more than an hour to satisfy the request, whoever has to search will keep time and they can bill either actual cost or not to exceed $30 an hour. There's an exception if it requires some high-tech consulting that is very, very expensive. That could be charged.
Whatever the fee is for it.
As long as it's reasonable within the parameters of what that profession is. We had occasion recently to study that and found that if we hired a technician to look at all the computers, and recruiters that search their emails and read them, they would charge $175 an hour. And they're considering whether they can pay it or not. Obviously, they cannot.
So that request isn't attached to this request, is it two separate?
They're two separate requests.
It's an earlier request.
So with that, do we feel like we have a need to pass this on an emergency basis, so we've got one on file, because otherwise it would take 3 meetings to do this.
Well, you can adopt that on first reading tonight.
We can adopt these on an emergency basis and then still follow the process, so it's in.
Because the request said within 3 days, right?
Yeah, the one we've got to send to that individual has to be global, because I think the request specifically said the core policy you have right now.
In place.
So we got to send them the one we have in place. But if we wanted to adopt this on an emergency basis right now, we can, and then go through the next meeting would be like the second reading, and then the next meeting would be the third.
Yes, you could.
We still have to follow the procedure, but you can, as a board, adopt a policy on an emergency basis at one reading. And then go through your steps. We're not trying to eliminate the steps, just trying to get it in place right now. So, that's the preference of the board. And the recommendation of
The new policies that are in here then, and we did have an old policy in here as well, right? Is that right? I really hadn't had a chance to read it, there's not much to read on the old policies.
Jesse recommended it.
There's no real urgency as long as we get it done.
the only, I was thinking of the way the core requests keep flying in at us, if we have the new policy in place, we cover the electronic stuff and, you know, whatever the fee structure is. Because one of the things we run into, we get a core request that says, one of them wanted to have paper backup, and specifically said paper backup. But when you start looking at the paper backup, it turns out the paper backup is downstairs in the tools, and those files, when they were moved from Eckhart over to here, when everything was changed back administratively, they were just put in the room. Well, they're out of order right now. Take a half a day off, go do your job, go downstairs in the tools and look for stuff. You know, you're actually probably going to have to ask those individuals if they charge up to whatever reason, like $30 an hour, whatever it is, for them to go ahead and do that. So I think that's the urgency to get this done so that we can charge an appropriate fee. and have a good policy that reflects modern technology here as well. So that would be my recommendation. That
What was your suggestion, Linda, because of Jesse's recommendation?
I'm just going on Jesse's recommendation that he understands that better and better into some of the district, us doing what we need to do based on his recommendation.
Well, it's not complicated. We have an old policy
Right.
that's way, way outdated. Is contrary to existing state statute because it was adopted in 2005. CASB is recommending all schools. They were very similar, so my suggestion was that we.
So you have a second?
Second.
Okay, so is that correct?
So this is KDB.
Is there,
Because we have to,
is there a
this
reason
policy
to
under
do two more, I mean, read it again, or for two more readings if we're adopting it now? Is it?
Yeah. The same, KDB and KDBR is what the motion was, to adopt it immediately tonight and then follow up with the second reading and final reading like we normally do.
So we'll do KDB first, because that's the other on the agenda.
Okay. She said we have to do them separate parts.
Second.
It was the same urgency. Roll call.
Ms. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Manterra?
Yes.
Mr. Sandwell?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Okay, that takes care of those two. And the next thing is the negotiated agreement. I don't have a signed off copy, I have a copy somewhere. I think we probably want to, everybody wants to see what that was.
Let me go.
I wasn't in on negotiations except for like a day and a half, so I can defer any questions anybody might have. And that was there for a long period of time and I was there.
Is that where we're at now?
Yeah, negotiated agreement 5.3.
How was that on that?
Yeah, well, you know, I think things were quite lengthy, and we've been doing that for back since June or something. So there was something like 8 meetings that we've had. And the holdup was not knowing where we were at with the budget. So Carolyn came in yesterday and kind of gave us a brief synopsis on the first 4 or 5 pages she showed us tonight. So we had a better idea where we stand, with the budget, because we couldn't make any commitments to the union on any increases that were monetary. And originally we had discussed way back in maybe the 4th meeting that we ever had, or the 3rd meeting, that we would give the employees a $30 increase to help offset the $100. We thought that the money was there. Subsequently, we found out later that we didn't know what we had. So we rescinded that offer to them and had to take it back because we just didn't know financially where we were at. And then in clearing things up with Carolyn yesterday, she came and said we did have, the funds that we did have, and that we wouldn't be out of line doing what we were doing. So that's where that 350 came in originally. Then with the change today was an added 18,000, and actually the amount is $17,750. So the union we bargained with today represented 60 employees. Teachers union, we're talking about the classified today, which would be your bus drivers and your secretaries and others, food service. So we figured that with the teachers, they would want to piggyback off of that as well. So we just felt that it was proper to extend that invitation also to the teachers. So that rolled it into 117 people that actually in the district take opportunity of the welfare package. So that total came for a one-time shot at $30 a month for 5 months, or $17,550 a month, correct? And so we decided to move on that, and of course we were stuck on a lot of items, but with that incentive and stuff that we offered, they agreed. We have a tentative agreement with the classified personnel as of now. And that was what the increase was with that 18,000.
So a total of 117 employees
Yes.
is inclusive of that initial 60 that you were talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, it is. Yeah. We just felt that, we're trying to maintain some type of consistency, and what you offer one group, we felt was necessary to offer the same to the other groups. We can't be the teachers out and just take care of the classified or vice versa. So we wanted to try to keep things consistent there. We had some other issues that we had on annual leave buybacks, and we made those all percentages and the changes that we accepted. It's a long process, but it's hard to try to deal with offering individuals, groups a step, and you don't really know where you stand with your money. Do we offer it, and then that step stays forever? You need to make sure that there's money available and be able to do that. So, with Carolyn's help and getting more accurate figures, we felt we were able to do that at this point. And of course, we all know that we tried to pass that mill levy the last time to include retaining qualified staff and teachers. So, hopefully, this next time around, that if we get that to pass or a bond issue or extension, then we won't have to deal with that again.
That was $30 a month times how many months?
Just the 5 months.
Oh, 5.
There's only 5 more months remaining
Okay.
in basically the contract, and we were extending the contract for each organization till June 30th, which would be the end of the fiscal year. Which also means we need to start negotiating again according to the agreement, like in March.
Still,
Yeah, well, there's a lot of issues that we had there that we just couldn't come to an agreement on. Time limits and time constraints and stuff, we just couldn't hammer out those issues. So rather than dwell on the deadline, because the class, so we get into that problem with the contract being updated or whatever, not in force. So, it's a tedious process, and it's hard. And I think I got the impression that we felt that our employees felt, with discussing with Paul and I, that they really weren't valued. I tried to explain to them that I think that between Paul and I, that we do value our employees, regardless of whatever position that they're employed with the district. We value each and every employee with great value, and we try to express that to them. My concern was our commitment as board members to the public, that we spend the public's money, rightly. And with that in mind, how could we offer a step increase if we didn't have the money? And I think they realized that the money's not there. So, so we backed off of the step increase. They backed off on the step increase requirement, and we were able to reach some sort of an agreement. So we moved forward with giving them the help for the $30 a month. And it's hard on these employees because they were paying like $371 a month. Now they're paying $471, whatever the figure is for them. But it's a $100 increase. So it was a 25% increase across the board for these employees, and they're actually going backwards with their take-home pay. And it's hard, and we understand all that. We all understand.
Oh, United States is actually.
And it's all in the board. Anyway.
But going forward, I think in the next negotiation is, in order to be doing those, we can remind the public that we said severe consequences, and this is the severe consequence. It hasn't ended, and they can help us make those decisions easier. It's easier to make a decision with the money than not. I don't think that the staff understood the whole importance of that.
The original original statement said something like, increment steps shall be granted on August 1st of each year. It's in the agreement. And quite frankly, that's exactly what it said. If you don't have money, you can't give it. So as part of the concessions, the expenditures based on the annual financial statements for the year, blah, 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 then blanket. So that was part of the concession. I thought that was pretty good. Also, there was the buyout that we've had was at 50%. When you retire, 50% of the release, you get paid 50%. That got modified. If you got 15 years or more on the next agreement as well. But those were the things that were big. The $30 and most of it, I think. Right?
I didn't get the full.
Yeah, for people with less than 15 years, and that financial qualifying statement on the shell.
Shall, yes, that was big.
Those were the two big things.
And this agreement ends June 30th, 2018. It's only till then. You just mentioned that Paul. No step. You mentioned the 40% of the grandfather, the $30 in health, shall, and the financial.
Going back to their membership on Friday to ratify it, and if both parties ratify the agreement expires, and they're without. Right?
The 12th, yes.
The 12th.
Carolyn's recommendation was.
I mean, it's helpful. This one will solve the problem for the employees. If they got went up by $100, but at least it's a good faith effort on our part to try.
That's what I was looking for, the bottom of that, those reserves, so that didn't, if in the event we ran into a cash flow difficulty, we should always keep that in mind too with the reserves, and it's well above what I thought was. Because after we vote, then we move on. But Dan brought up the negotiation committee as far as the board is concerned. I know that there's his question, and I don't know if he got an answer because he's not here, but he asked me and I didn't know.
When this was in, because we made Joe the both.
Sitting in on those negotiations. When did it become just an appointed board member that sits in on those negotiations?
The negotiated agreement is an agreement between the Board of Education and the union. That they felt they should be negotiating with the entire board, not with the individual. Agreed on that was that she thought they needed to negotiate directly with the board.
That's very time consuming for the board.
Yeah, I can see why it is the way, but we must be.
You'd have to have meetings and schedule meetings with one of the 3 members of the board to be present, or 3 or more members to be present, so.
Right.
You know, I understand your concerns with that. All I know is that that's how it's been done since I've been here for 4 years.
Yeah, I didn't have an answer for him, so I don't know if he got his
people and that was
answer
it.
his question answered. Just for
And then the other thing, it takes a long time. I mean, we spend 3-4 hours, maybe 7 hours, whatever. That's what times every time we meet, you know. And then if you're looking at Scott's, and then we're getting substitutes, so you know it does get a little costly in that area as well. So if the whole board wants to be in on the negotiations, I'm not opposed to that at all.
I just want to make sure it's compliance.
That was the 2 board members to go talk to them on the sidebar. And one of the first things they told us is, we should be negotiating with you, not with your superintendent, and blah, blah, blah. That's something out there.
But I think Pat brought up a big, at this point, is if we have all board members, it constitutes a meeting.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you have to take minutes and then.
I wasn't even thinking that.
I think that ought to be brought up to them.
I think, you know, personally, if we knew where we stood financially and we were on pretty solid ground, it would move quickly. Because the sticking point is, they want to step for retirement purposes and for money now, you know, and they're in the district. That wouldn't be a question, because all you really got to do is just give them the figures that we have, which they're entitled to anyway. And it's just kind of like, they like is an automatic one. And if we were in a good financial sound position, we could just do that automatically, no problem. With this being scary like it was, expenditures are exceeding revenue intake. And we've been doing that for a few years now, so we need
Well, the
to.
board ultimately has control over it, it's just like a committee comes and reports like a board should, and the board decides on that recommendation. We could vote it down, but we might look at time frame is not such that there'd be time to renegotiate to meet the timelines.
Right.
See, I don't see anywhere in the agreement that says that you negotiate directly with them. I don't see that.
No, that's an absurd interpretation. The board, for example, doesn't even have to have one board member. They can appoint the superintendent, the personnel director, the CFO to do the negotiating and bring the agreement for your ratification or approval or not. There's a political aspect of wanting to congregate the entire board in one setting because they think they can require the board to make hastier decisions. And that's not the way you want it.
Right. So the time frame should be discussed too, so that if we did not accept it, we have a time frame that would allow us to renegotiate if it were not acceptable, right?
Basically, we've got to start negotiating the next contract to start July 1. We've got to start tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, really.
That's
That was a problem, because it was actually up on June 30th, and we extended it like to November, and we extended it to December, and then we extended it to January 10, or 12, and that was a problem, kept it changing. The problem was, is every time they would ask about the finance, we really had no answer for it. So that was the problem. Yeah, and when we get a consistent CFO that's right on top of things and report to us like you'd like every month, so we can have those figures here, what we spent and the quarters and stuff, that'll take care of itself. It should move the process along pretty speedily.
I think there's points inside the agreement besides money that need to be looked at, and some of them affect money. But I think once you get a good frame in there that you can agree with, then the financials are going to be kind of part of that, so to speak, to agree on that. Anyway, but we've got a motion, I think, and a second to approve the negotiated agreement that Scott handed out to us just now. So roll call.
No, first and second.
Is that? I don't
I don't remember who's.
I don't think so.
I don't think my commission motion to accept it.
Okay.
And Joe seconded it.
Okay.
Roll call.
Ms. Harden?
Yes.
Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. The next item was the resolution that we put on there because we thought we had to pass the resolution to go with the budget, but since we're not going to pass the budget, we don't need the resolution to spend $50,368,000. She'll have that all ready for us. And since we don't need to do it now, do we want to add the budget approval to the meeting on the 16th that morning? When we get done?
The 16th or the 24th.
Which one do you want, 16 or 24?
15, 16?
Okay.
Got a regular meeting on the 24th at night, or we could do, if we add it to the 16th, we've got to do on the 16th, the internal search, the extra cost for the bus cameras if we have to approve anything for freight, and perhaps approve the budget and the resolution to go with that. Is that the only thing on the 16th? So we'd have three items.
I will add something else, you know, we'll have a list that one.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'll make a way to know.
That's good of the danger. That's the meeting at 10:30, right?
10:30 in the morning, no. You want to add it, you want to wait till the 24th? Want to get it done?
Get it done or just wait till the 24th?
I don't know.
Don't matter to me.
We just gotta have it done before the end of the month.
She might not be on our way to this cruise if we did on the 16th.
Well, if we do on 16th, she'll probably
That's
do the
true.
phone numbers.
Yeah, 16th.
Okay, so we don't have to do that here, so we'll add those three items to the meeting that begins on the 16th at 10:30 a.m. in this room. Okay, the other item,
Let me just a second, for your clarification, this, what we just approved now, is only going to take effect provided that the union ratifies on their part on Friday.
That's correct. I think it says so in there.
It does say
Because
so.
both parties have ratified.
Right, on the second paragraph it says that, just so you know.
item 515 was to change the date of the February meeting to anything but the 28th.
I can do that.
27th?
Move it ahead just maybe a little bit more than that, I would think, if we could.
Just
Just don't do it the week of the 14th. That's Valentine's. Oh, I'm buried on that one.
Oh, yeah, you
When's
can,
that Wednesday, too?
let's see.
Make it on the 14th.
So, 22nd, could you do it on that Monday?
That's a 22nd is that Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at January.
26th is
I
Monday.
apologize. 26th is a Monday, that would be perfect. If I could, we
I
could.
can't do it on
Okay.
Mondays, guys, I teach at the college on Monday nights now.
Okay, can we, what about the 22nd, 23rd, 21st?
22nd is a Thursday.
Thursday? Good then, is that all right?
What date?
The 22nd, Thursday, at 6 p.m. for our meeting instead of the 28th?
Yeah,
All right.
that's right.
22nd? I think the only question I have is when does Lent start? When's that Lent start?
It's on the 14th.
On the fourth, well, it starts on Valentine's.
And it does,
That's not a big deal.
First day of that, that's right.
No, well, I don't know.
no flowers, don't give flowers.
I don't really know that for a fact.
So
I just said that.
I move that we change the meeting from the 28th to the 22nd.
We got a motion to change the meeting to the 22nd on February.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, roll call?
Ms. Harkin? Yes. Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Okay, next item on the agenda is to go into executive session. Motion for the board to go into executive session in accordance with Colorado Revised Statutes 24-6-402. Has to do with, do we need legal advice?
I'm not aware of anything, no, sir.
Okay, personnel. Okay, we've got a couple of issues. One is a request for, request for disability. Yes. So we've got a personnel issue, request for disability. You may or may not want to look at the applicant pool that we've got. You know, that should be done privately, I think, at this point.
Or what, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, under personnel, we didn't have any under legal, but under personnel, there is a request for disability we got to discuss. And also, did you want to look at the applicants that we've had so far?
Apply for the intern position.
Interim position?
We just look at them, I guess.
I'm going to do it.
You look at it, look at both.
If you want to. Yeah, because it's people, we don't want to do that publicly at this point. And then, students, I think we have some expulsions that we have to discuss. We do. So I need a motion to go into that for F, personnel, and H, students.
So moved.
Second.
Then moved and seconded, roll call.
Ms. Harkin? Yes. Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
See everybody about 2 hours?
Oh,
No.
Hey, that's what I was thinking.
by 9:30? You'll be done by 9:30 or what?
Yeah, it was 7:30 now.
Yeah, we want to.
Looks like that.
Out of here, 10:30 maybe. That sounds good to me, I'm ready.
Waiting for you. I know. I thought I forgot to do it.
I was almost out of here.
Hey,
I told you to set this email, and then I said, okay, I'm
Why do we have left here?
We have to vote on those expulsions.
One possible hire.
Okay, yes.
that's what I heard. Yeah, we're good.
That was a requirement for the teaching. That's why we needed to be consistent with the job description and the qualifications. Well, you have to have a master's in that.
You have a
License in
Yes,
the city,
right here.
masters, and you need 3 years teaching.
For what? Oh,
I'm not opposed to doing whatever to
No, I'm opposed.
for the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. Okay, Diane, hearing none, we discussed students from 9:20 to 9:32. Next item on the agenda is information action, approval of expulsion 2017-2018.07. I need to hear a motion to approve the expulsion.
So,
Moved and seconded, discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Montero? Mr.
Yes.
Montero? Mr. Sandoval?
yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Need a motion to approve the expulsion 1718-08.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Harvey? Yes. Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Okay, approval of expulsion.
Ms. Harvey? Yes. Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
And finally, expulsion 1718, number 10.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion?
Discussion, I would just say that the process was handled well, and I felt very fair in the decision for the offenses.
Thank you. Roll call?
Ms. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Okay, do we have any resignations? Any appointments, hiring, or terminations?
Resignation?
We do. What? Sorry, what?
I thought we did
I
Cheryl.
thought we did that with, yeah, we do.
Now we did not.
What are we doing?
Oh, Cheryl Dawson, so she's like.
Also, the secretary for middle school. That came in during the break, I guess. You must have missed it the last
I
week.
think it came the last day, you're right.
Oh, okay.
And that's for what position?
That first middle school secretary.
Are we accepting the resignation?
She's already moved on, hasn't she?
Well, this is just a resignation?
Yeah.
Dina?
Yeah, I think there's a border with the company, not really.
Oh, did you say Pete?
I didn't, she just came and put two and two together.
Excuses, excuses.
Hey, I'm not too proud to go through drive-through windows anymore and say, do you like kids?
Oh, I don't know about that one.
I don't know if we have to have that.
Well, the paper's not here, but it's, I don't know, what's her first name?
Cheryl.
Cheryl Rogowski.
Yes.
Dina received communication on email or mail or
Hard copy.
hard copy.
December 15th.
December 15th, we were already past the last meeting, saying that she resigned her position. And that was effective immediately, was it?
Well, but she used the winter break as her 2 weeks notice.
Oh. Okay, so the paperwork will be right here, but we know who it is, and we just need a motion to accept it.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded.
Pat? Pat moved.
Shouldn't have the recorder on the meeting.
Where are we at? What's the meeting?
Who's going? What you just said?
Sticking my thumb.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, roll call.
You rated
Did you have any discussion on that before?
Any discussion?
Any discussion?
Just
Okay, roll call.
yes.
We want to disclose who's the guilty party?
I think everybody knows that, thank you very
We
much.
do now.
Jeff hired it. That's the guilty party.
So roll
Okay, roll call, Deb?
Yes.
Paul? Yes. Dan? Is, Pat?
call. Yes.
And Joe?
Yes.
Okay. So was that the only resignation you had?
That is.
When you start looking at him, I thought you were saying about his,
Oh, no.
no, we accepted that already. Couldn't follow that. Okay, any appointments, hiring, or termination?
We do, you have the elementary Eckhart counselor position, right? You have that? This is a part-time counseling position. It's of course funded not by grant, not by general fund, but e-care funds. And Jackie Vallejos is the recommendation. She has a BA in psychology. She's been a paraprofessional at Eckhart, severe needs and reading interventionist. Jackie will be committed to completing her counseling program, and to acquire a school counselor license. She will also renew her substitute license. This is a long-term substitute situation here. It's not, it's not a permanent position. We have long-term subs in this district teaching. Both applicants, neither one of them had a counseling license. So, again, it's a long-term substitute license situation.
I know Jackie, I thought when she was in high school, so I know she's a good kid, good worker, and, I think she'll be good for the job. My question would be, are we hiring as a counselor, as a long-term sub, what are we calling this?
We've got
Part-time counselors, what it
Yes,
says.
part-time counselor at Eckhart Elementary School. That's what it's
but it's a long-term substitute situation.
Does it say that?
The
Well,
reason,
when we approved the position for the grant, we approved a permanent, not a sub position, right? And we said it was with grant funding, it still was a permanent position funded by a grant, so that wasn't a long-term sub situation, that was a position.
yeah, that's what we approved, that's why I asked you what you were doing, because basically what you're saying is, it sounds like you're saying you took the original job description or whatever it was, and that, because there would have been different qualifications than what you've got here. So you put that original position aside and you're hiring something else, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're hired as a long-term sub now, as I think this out. You don't, I don't think you have to approve long-term subs, we haven't done that. We've got a high school position that's a long-term sub, we've got a middle school position that's a long-term sub. Did we take, for example, our middle school science as a long-term sub to the year or no? No? I don't think we do. So,
But those were substitutes for an existing position, this is a brand new position, and we're already hiring.
no, this is out of e-care funds, it's not,
Well, what happens if we run out of the grant money, then still have to keep her payer?
no, not a long-term substitute situation, Joe. We don't.
Who's in the back of the long-term sub?
I think if we go long-term sub, we don't have to do anything.
What do we do with, like, we have a long-term sub teaching math at middle school,
Science. We've had a long-term sub teaching science in the middle school for 2 years now, right? So, I don't think you have to, now that I'm thinking about this, you don't really have to do this.
I think that's a different situation over when you have a substitute in the classroom teaching. I don't see, how many students are at Eckhart?
A little under 200, I think. I think it's a little under 200, if I'm right.
100 and some, and you need it. I can't see that. So, and I think we're overstaffed already. We have the same amount of teachers and administrators, coaches and everything as when Suzanne had. Trinidad School District has 1,700 students. We haven't gone down anything.
But we already approved the position because it was a grant position.
Right.
But the position is a counselor, which is a different credential than a teacher, and this person does not meet those counseling credentials.
On the other hand, I don't think that the counselor that we had in place before had counseling credentials.
But we're more that to start off on the right foot this time instead of wishy-washy back and forth, after this one wants that. We'll give her this one, we give him this one, we give that this one. We've got to set a pattern in local, as far as I know. You know, when Paul's daughter applied for the job of the junior, we didn't give her the job until she got it.
But is this any different than us? We don't, just like, for example, the middle school position, and we also got a special ed position at the high school that we filled with a long-term sub too. I mean, when we can no longer fill some of these positions.
But do we need those positions? That's the thing. I think the special ed over there, yeah, you need a position.
Joe,
My wife's there by herself with all those special ed kids.
Yeah.
She gets home 6:30, 7 o'clock at night sometimes.
In their defense, Olivia expressed the need for a counselor. She found the funding, and we approved it. We approved that we could do that. Now, I see the decision as, I see counselors as very important, and I've said it from the beginning, and I think counselors need to do counselor work, not playground duty and cover breaks and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just gonna say that I think they need, whatever the situation, I think they need counseling credentials to do counseling.
Well, that leads to your policy qualifications. If I'm under the correct assumption for that position itself, it requires a master's degree, a license by the state, as well as 3 years teaching experience for a counselor's position. My question is, if we're paying this with what kind of money?
See, when you hire a long-term sub situation, they get hired as a step one teacher. That's because they're doing all the planning and everything that's required.
Are we paying her out of title funds on this?
Out of e-care funds.
E-care funds, is that different than title?
Deb, I think you know a lot about it.
It's
So
like a
can
kindergarten,
you use?
it's like a full-time kindergarten fee stipend, and that's how they're utilizing it. And it has to be justified through the state. But again, e-care is kindergarten and it's teachers, it's not necessarily counselors. But that's not for us to determine. The state
So would they take exception to us because it's their funds that we're hiring someone who may not meet the qualifications of the job description?
No, I think that you can justify it with the state, but I'm looking at it from a kid point of view and a family point of view. If that kid has issues that is in need of counseling, I want it by a person that's qualified to counsel that kid, not just a long-term sub with less credentials. And I know in rural America that's hard to find, but I'd rather a kid be coached right or not at all.
But I'll have to play devil's advocate here. Is it any different than us hiring a long-term sub that's not qualified to be a substitute?
Well, science teacher doesn't have to know in science, they just have to teach. I mean, have a teaching.
We've got a long-term sub that I'm never teaching you guys. We've had that for 2 years.
And with your counselor's degrees, the counselor's positions require someone with a master's degree, which is higher than a BA degree, to teach a class. And counselors deal with kids that have certain problems and have to have certain training to be able to combat their problems, or be able to mess with them. And I think she says here that she's done some social services work, supposed to be so notified and no longer considered for the position. So, if you're going to talk policies, and there may be another policy that says something different. I know one one policy that says you look at all applicants can apply. If there's an applicant for the position that doesn't meet the requirements of the job description, then they're supposed to be so notified that they don't meet the qualifications and no longer considered for the position. So I don't know, I know you're saying long-term sub to fill the position, but if I'm hearing what Deb's saying, she's saying to fill a position where someone has the qualifications to be able to deal with those problems. Is that correct?
Yes. She's got a BA in psychology.
I think if you pull up the counselor's position, it deals with the masters with the license provided by the state, right?
Oh, I think you're right.
I think I am, and then I think it goes one step further to be, have a teaching experience of 3 years.
I agree with all that. I'm just saying, I think that more and more, because of our rural nature and we can't find teachers, we can't find counselors, we're going to run into situations like this, just like we've had in middle school for 2 years now, or we have at the high school. We can't fill them because we can't get qualified applicants. And these kids, I would challenge young children need counseling just as, maybe even in some cases, more than older children, because if we could solve those issues at that level, we might not have them.
I don't see that she worked with the Department of Human Services, though. You mentioned that. I don't see that.
I don't think.
It says this on the first paragraph, first big paragraph, the last line. She also worked as a social worker for the Department of Social Services.
Do they hiring the position primarily as a counselor, or are they hiring for someone to help with the specials and stuff like that?
I would say as a counseling situation, we've got, I know they've got some kids over there that's requiring some school. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, I agree, it's different. I heard you correctly, you said you would rather have someone who had the qualifications to deal with it than someone not at all. Someone that's not experienced to be able to handle the emotion and counsel.
You're saying you'd rather have someone qualified than or nobody?
Until we can find somebody.
We might not find somebody. We have a hard time finding counselors, period, much less a part-time.
This is what, 6 hours a day or 4 hours a day? 4 hours a day, part-time. It says step 1 counselor / teacher.
I know, Evan said we needed more teachers for duty and more teachers. So, just bringing up the discussion of that.
Yeah.
Do you want to wait till Olivia's here to give her spiel before we take the vote?
We can wait till the 16th.
I think that would be fair just to take, I'd like to hear from I'm sorry, from Olivia. I'm sure she has some concerns and some reasons why she wanted to.
And I asked her, but she got ill. Had the illness.
Okay.
There's a motion to table it.
Okay, good. Second?
Second.
You will move in second, roll call?
Yes.
Diane, can you all vote yes? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. The other thing,
Okay, move to table it.
yeah. Okay. There was one more thing on hiring that is tied to the termination, not termination, but resignation that we had for the position over at the middle school, the secretary's position. Ms. Shelley informed me that today when we were talking at the negotiations that they're working very hard to try to get that position hired, and it's real critical to get somebody in there right away. If she is successful in interviewing and getting somebody qualified, would we be willing to approve that so she can get that person hired and get their boots on the ground if possible right away?
I just hate to keep adding to that agenda, but would that be
Why not?
Well, yeah.
I don't see any problem.
Because I want to do it before that.
You can't get it done before the 16th?
Probably not, probably gonna have to interview on Monday. Yeah, it's gonna take me a little time.
Okay, got it on the list.
Put it on the 16th.
You told me I had a long list, for you.
All right, but I didn't want to leave it out.
No, I appreciate it, absolutely, because it
Go for
is.
it. We table that till the 16th, the 16th.
That was tabled to the 16th.
Who moved it? Who made the motion to second that?
I did.
Okay, and then we'll go ahead and add the one on the agenda for that. Okay, are we done? No retirements? Going to take a minute to digest that.
Mr. Manager, it's my fault.
You don't need one, I guess.
Oh, never mind.
Or your name's on it. It's addressed to you.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to ask, before any discussion takes place regarding this letter that we were provided with prior to this and now, I requested that, can we just open with that?
I relayed that information, that request to Manny Bedard, our SRO, and he emailed me back saying, "Sir, in regards to the press release you requested regarding the incident at El Rancho, I spoke to Captain Halser. At this point in time, we are not able to make a report on this case as it is still active and under investigation."
Civil matter, basically. I don't know if it's a school district matter now, it's in the civil.
It's a criminal invest, unless
So I really,
Would you rather just table any discussion on this until the police report? I have a motion to table any further discussion on the police report on this situation.
Madam Chairman, I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Ms. Hartman?
yes.
Mr. Montero?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval?
I'll abstain from voting.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Superintendent's update.
I think everything, I've got a list that I can update you on. You want to, because of the hour, you could do that on the 16th.
I think so.
I have nothing to say that pressing there.
I'll wait till 16, everybody. Okay, the next thing is motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Roll call.
Ms. Hartman? Yes. Mr. Montero? Mr. Sandoval?
Yes.
Mr. Terry?
Better all show up